mystery of the severed feet in British Columbia, a modern-day maritime enigma. There are few things more disturbing than the discovery of a human body part washed ashore. But what if it isn't a whole body, but just one specific part, the human foot stranger? Still, what if it's not a one-time event, but a pattern that continues over years with no clear explanation? This is not a fictional thriller or a cleverly constructed horror tale. This is a real-world mystery that has confounded Canadian authorities, scientists, and the public for over a decade. Since 2007 at least, 14 human feet, all detached from their bodies, and often encased in running shoes, have mysteriously washed up along the coastlines of British Columbia, Canada, and nearby regions in the Pacific Northwest. The latest of these strange finds was discovered on Gabriola Island, a quiet wooded area located in the Strait of Georgia. A man walking the beach came across what looked like a hiking boot lodged in a log jam, which occurs when drifting wood clusters block the flow of water. On closer inspection, the boot held a decomposing human foot. This was the 14th such discovery, but far from the first to raise alarms. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police RCMP were once again called in to investigate, as they had done repeatedly since the first such foot was found in 2007. That year, a sneaker containing a human foot was found on Jedediah Island, sparking immediate media interest. Over the years, more feet continue to appear, always near the coast, and almost always inside sneakers or running shoes. To this day, the mystery remains partially unsolved, though some pieces of the puzzle have emerged. One of the most unsettling aspects of these discoveries is that many of the bodies have never been found. In some cases, feet were matched via DNA testing to individuals who had gone missing, but the rest of their remains were never recovered. In other instances, the identities of the victims remain unknown. What happened to these people? Were they lost at sea, victims of foul play, or were they simply the unlucky casualties of accidents whose remains drifted for miles before falling apart? Several theories have been proposed. The most benign explanation is that these feet belong to individuals who died in boating or plane accidents and the rest of their bodies decomposed in the ocean. The fact that these feet are often preserved inside shoes, especially newer buoyant models made of light foam and synthetic materials, supports this idea. As the human body decomposes, joints, such as the ankle, are particularly vulnerable to separation, especially in water. The shoe protects the foot, keeping it intact, while the rest of the body falls prey to the elements and marine life. A related theory blames natural disasters like tsunamis, which can sweep people out to sea with immense force and scatter remains across vast distances. In the wake of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, for instance, body parts were discovered on beaches hundreds of miles from where the victims were last seen. Could something similar have occurred on Canada's western coast? But some more sinister theories refuse to go away. Is this the work of a serial killer or an organized crime group disposing of victims in the ocean? Some even speculate about illegal organ harvesting or human trafficking gone wrong, though there is no concrete evidence to support these claims. These more conspiratorial explanations tend to thrive in the absence of closure, especially when gruesome details like severed limbs are involved. Adding to the confusion are the instances of hoaxes and pranks. According to Bob McClintock of the British Columbia Coroner's Office, there have been incidents where fake feet, sometimes constructed from animal bones or even chicken bones, were placed inside sneakers and left on beaches to mimic the real phenomenon. "We've had people put dog-foot skeletons in runners and leave them on the beach," he remarked. "While these hoaxes are rare, they do complicate the investigative process and blur the line between genuine cases and fabricated ones." Despite these complications, forensic investigators have made measurable progress in some cases. For example, one foot found in 2017 on Vancouver Island was traced back to a 79-year-old man from Washington State, USA. The man had been reported missing, and although the full circumstances of his death remain unknown, authorities do not suspect foul play. This case, like others, points toward accidental death or suicide followed by natural decomposition in a marine environment. The coroner's office in British Columbia has been careful to maintain that no evidence points to criminal activity in the majority of these cases. While it might sound mysterious or even horrifying to think of disembodied feet showing up ashore, there is, according to experts, a relatively straightforward explanation rooted in anatomy and oceanography. When a body is submerged, it decomposes in specific ways. The foot, encased in a floating sneaker, separates and drifts independently. In many cases, this can take weeks or months, and by the time the foot arrives on shore, the rest of the body is long gone. Yet not all the pieces fit neatly into this explanation. A handful of the feet remain unidentified, and their presence raises legitimate questions. Why are only feet being found? Why not hands or heads or torsos? Are certain parts of the ocean more likely to preserve and transport limbs than others? And if so, does this suggest a specific current pattern or convergence zone near British Columbia's coastlines? Researchers have attempted to model ocean drift patterns to better understand how a severed foot might travel. According to these models, it is plausible that some of the feet could have floated from across the Pacific, even from as far as Asia. But again, identifying victims would require DNA samples from those distant populations, something that is not readily accessible. Furthermore, the psychological impact of this mystery on the public cannot be understated. The image of a sneaker-clad foot washing up on a tranquil beach is deeply unsettling. It triggers our primal fears of death, dismemberment, and the unknown. News outlets have dubbed the phenomenon everything from the Shoe Sea mystery to the Soul Survivors. And yet for all the headlines and speculation, most of the world has moved on, leaving only a few curious minds still asking questions. Perhaps what makes this story so compelling is not just its gruesome nature, but its ordinariness. There are no monsters, no supernatural forces, no global conspiracies, just the quiet, strange reality that death at sea may result in a foot drifting ashore. And yet the mystery still lingers. Are there more feet out there waiting to be found? Will we ever learn the identity of those whose lives ended in the deep waters of the Pacific? Or will the ocean continue to guard its secrets, giving us only one foot at a time? The ghost ships of North Korea, a haunting mystery from the sea. On the rugged and windswept western shores of Japan, an unsettling phenomenon has quietly persisted for years. Fishing vessels, often in various states of decay, have been washing ashore, their wooden hulls beaten, their sails torn, and more disturbingly, many of them carrying no living passengers. These derelict boats, eerily dubbed ghost ships, are believed to have originated from North Korea, and the stories behind their appearances have raised chilling questions about the human cost of survival, geopolitical pressure, and the mysterious silence of a closed-off nation. The phenomenon began receiving significant international attention in 2017, although similar cases had occurred years prior. The pattern was hauntingly consistent. Small boats with rudimentary construction and minimal navigation equipment arrived on Japanese beaches, many of them carrying human remains in various stages of decomposition. Some boats bore North Korean writing or symbols, others carried military-style markings, and at least one displayed a tattered North Korean flag. In the first year alone, 11 ghost ships were documented, igniting a wave of speculation and concern across both Japan and the international community. One of the more distressing details was that many of these vessels arrived with no survivors. Corpses, often skeletal or heavily decomposed, lay sprawled inside the boats. It appeared that these were not the remains of quick deaths, but rather those of people who had perished slowly and hopelessly, drifting in the vast waters between Korea and Japan, never making it back to their homeland. The Japanese Coast Guard, alarmed by the frequency and grisly nature of these incidents, launched multiple investigations. Yet answers remained frustratingly elusive. In November 2017, a breakthrough of sorts occurred. A small boat carrying 8 living North Korean men arrived at the Yurihonjo Marina in Japan. The men claimed they were fishermen who had lost their way at sea. They appeared weak, cold, and confused. Within weeks, another boat carrying 10 men also drifted into Japanese waters, bearing a similar explanation. The sudden influx of ghost ships, some with survivors and some with only the dead, intensified interest in what could be driving such a tragic and mysterious wave of maritime migration. Multiple theories soon emerged to explain the ghost ship phenomenon, each pointing to different and often equally disturbing possibilities. The first theory posits a relatively straightforward cause. These were simply fishing accidents gone terribly wrong. North Korean fishermen, pushed by government quotas or a desperate need to provide for their families, may have ventured too far into open seas. Given the primitive condition of their boats, most lacked modern navigation tools. GPS or even functioning radios, these voyages were precarious from the start. Once lost, with no means to communicate or correct course, many fishermen likely perished from exposure, dehydration, or starvation, leaving their vessels to drift until they finally hit land. However, this leads us to the second theory, which dives deeper into the economic and political pressure within North Korea. In recent years, the regime has faced increasingly harsh international sanctions, particularly following its nuclear weapons tests. These sanctions, in turn, have placed immense strain on domestic agriculture and food production. In response, the government reportedly ramped up its demands on the fishing industry, requiring greater yields despite dwindling resources. Making matters worse, the North Korean government reportedly sold exclusive fishing rights to China, effectively pushing native fishermen into less fertile and far more dangerous waters further from home. With more risk and fewer resources, fishermen resorted to taking longer, more perilous journeys in rickety, outdated boats, ill-equipped to handle the ocean's fury. The consequences were fatal for many. These ghost ships then become tragic artifacts of economic desperation, casualties of geopolitical decisions made far from the sea. Yet the third theory carries even more intrigue and controversy. What if these men were not merely lost fishermen, but defectors or spies? Some analysts speculated that certain ships were actually manned by individuals attempting to flee the oppressive regime using fishing boats as a cover to reach Japanese shores. A few even proposed the possibility of covert intelligence missions where operatives were sent to gather data or test surveillance routes. This would explain why no official missing persons reports or rescue efforts were ever initiated by the North Korean government, because the missions, if they existed, were never meant to be acknowledged. But that is precisely what makes this mystery so haunting, the absence of any official acknowledgement or explanation. The North Korean government has remained silent about these incidents. Not once have they publicly commented on the loss of life, the disappearance of vessels, or the fate of the men who died at sea. There have been no repatriation requests for the remains, no diplomatic outreach, nothing. It's as though these individuals, living or dead, were never meant to return, and never meant to be spoken of. Japanese authorities, bound by international law and human rights protocols, have treated the survivors, humanely offering food, shelter, and medical care. Yet in most cases, the men found aboard the boats have requested to be returned to North Korea, an act that further deepens the confusion. Why would someone who risked so much to escape willingly go back? Were they truly lost fishermen unaware of where they had drifted, or were they under some kind of coercion? The media and public response has been mixed. For many, these ghost ships represent a grim window into life under a regime where failure, hunger, and fear dominate daily existence. For others, they serve as a stark reminder of how little we truly know about what goes on behind North Korea's closed borders. Meanwhile, in Japan, the phenomenon has stirred both compassion and concern. Villages near the western coast have grown wary, unsure whether the next drifting boat will bring survivors, the dead, or something more troubling. In the face of these haunting discoveries, one thing remains certain. These vessels are not just wooden boats. They are floating tombs, silent testimonies to suffering that defies easy categorization. They challenge us to ask difficult questions about human rights, government responsibility, and the cost of silence in the modern world. Will more ghost ships continue to appear? Is the worst yet to come? Or is this just the visible portion of a much deeper humanitarian crisis playing out beneath the waves, until North Korea speaks, and perhaps even long after the ocean may continue to deliver grim reminders of lives lost in the shadows? The flying humanoids of Chicago, bat-like beings or modern myths. In 2017, the city of Chicago, known for its towering skyline, historic neighborhoods, and rich jazz heritage, found itself thrust into the spotlight for an entirely different reason. Reports began surfacing of mysterious winged creatures described by witnesses as humanoid, with bat-like wings and glowing red eyes, flying over the cityscape and performing aerial feats that defied both logic and gravity. What started as a few scattered sightings quickly snowballed into a string of chilling encounters, with dozens of people claiming to have seen these eerie figures around Lake Michigan and the eastern edge of Chicago. While stories of winged humanoid creatures are not new to folklore, the Chicago encounters were uniquely modern, complete with police reports, YouTube testimonies, and real-time social media chatter. These weren't tales passed down by word of mouth, they were happening live in one of America's most populous urban areas. Witnesses describe the creatures as being between 6 and 8 feet tall, with jet-black leathery wings spanning up to 12 feet and exhibiting a gliding or swooping motion as they flew between buildings or hovered silently over roads and bodies of water. So what were these entities? And more importantly, were they even real? At first, many dismissed the sightings as mass hysteria, optical illusions, or the result of hoaxes. After all, in an age of drones, Hollywood-level costume design, and viral internet culture, it's easy to fabricate fantastical events. But the consistency of the accounts, combined with the credibility of several witnesses, began to draw attention from paranormal investigators and cryptozoologists. Suddenly, the Chicago Mothman, or flying humanoid, wasn't just a local curiosity. It was a full-blown modern mystery. The creatures didn't seem to follow a regular pattern. Some were seen soaring near the Adler Planetarium, while others were spotted perched atop tall buildings or even swooping down low over parks and sidewalks, vanishing just as quickly as they appeared. In nearly all cases, witnesses reported the same bone-chilling feature eyes that glowed red, often described as piercing, hypnotic, or predatory. Interestingly, the sightings clustered heavily around Lake Michigan, a region already rich in folklore and unexplained phenomena. Over the decades, the lake has been associated with UFO sightings, electromagnetic anomalies, and disappearances, leading some to speculate that the flying humanoids might be connected to broader, less understood energies or portals in the area. But who or what could these beings be? One of the more cultural theories links the creatures to Mexican folklore, particularly to a supernatural being known as lechuza. According to legend, lechuza are witches who transform into large owl-like or eagle-like creatures, usually to enact revenge or carry out dark magical intentions. However, even the most dramatic depictions of lechuza in folklore fall short of the massive scale described by Chicago witnesses. The creatures in Illinois appeared to be much larger, more bat-like than bird-like, and almost artificial in nature. That's where a second theory enters extraterrestrial visitation. Could these flying humanoids be biological drones, alien scouts, or even failed government experiments? While it might sound like something from a sci-fi movie, the UFO community has long speculated about humanoid-like beings involved in interdimensional travel. Some reports of alien encounters describe tall winged entities, and there's precedent in UFO lore for silent gliding movements and glowing eyes. Still, for many, this theory requires more belief than evidence. Then there's the time traveler hypothesis, perhaps the most philosophical of all. Some theorists argue that humanoids aren't aliens or cryptids at all, but rather humans from a distant future, evolved or altered to survive in different environments. The gliding bat-like wings may be artificial augmentations or evolutionary adaptations. Their odd appearances might be the result of exposure to different atmospheric conditions, radiation, or intentional design for flight. But then, the question becomes, why would they choose to reveal themselves in this form, terrifying, unnatural, and unexplainable, instead of blending in skeptics' point to misidentification as the most likely explanation? Large birds like herons, owls, or sandhill cranes, especially seen in poor lighting or against city backdrops, can appear far larger or more sinister than they actually are. Add to that the psychological influence of urban legends, and it's easy for the human brain to fill in the gaps. One person sees something strange, shares it, and suddenly dozens more see it too. But that argument doesn't sit well with everyone, especially not with the eyewitnesses themselves. Many of those who came forward did so reluctantly, often out of fear of ridicule or disbelief. Their stories were not sensationalized. In fact, most of them claimed to have no previous interest in the paranormal and were simply out walking their dogs, riding bikes, or driving home when the sightings occurred. The shock and fear in their voices were real. Their descriptions aligned. Their sincerity was palpable. Investigators such as Lon Strickler, a noted researcher in the field of the unexplained, began cataloging and analyzing these accounts. His database of flying humanoid sightings in Chicago grew to include over 40 individual reports in a span of just a few months, an unprecedented frequency for such a localized and specific phenomenon. But no definitive photographic or video evidence has ever been authenticated. While a few grainy clips and photos have surfaced online, none provide the clarity needed to confirm the existence of these beings. That has led to frustration among believers and relief among skeptics. After all, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and so far, all we have are testimonies. And yet there's something deeply archetypal about flying humanoids. From ancient angels to demonic gargoyles, Mothman to Batman cultures across the globe have imagined creatures that soar above humanity's symbols of either salvation or dread. Could the sightings in Chicago be a modern manifestation of a collective subconscious? A warning, a reflection of the anxieties of a sprawling metropolis facing social, economic, and environmental unrest. It's worth noting that while some people who claimed to have seen the humanoids reported nightmares, insomnia, or feelings of dread, none have suffered serious harm. There have been no attacks, abductions, or confirmed physical injuries. In that sense, the creatures remain more observers than predators or perhaps messengers. As the sightings dwindled toward the end of 2018, interest began to fade. The Chicago humanoid slowly slipped from the headlines, leaving behind an archive of eerie stories, a few sketches, and many unanswered questions. Was it a moment of collective hallucination, a hoax that spiraled out of control, or a genuine brush with the unknown in a world increasingly dominated by science, technology, and data? We are conditioned to dismiss the unexplained. But what if we shouldn't? What if, just beyond the veil of rationality, there are still mysteries that defy our frameworks? Mysteries with wings, glowing eyes, and the ability to remind us how little we truly understand. Whether real or imagined, the flying humanoids of Chicago captured something timeless, the human fascination with the skies, the fear of the unnatural, and the thrill of encountering the impossible. The Moai statues of Easter Island, guardians of a forgotten code, rising silently from the earth like sentinels of a forgotten world. The Moai statues of Easter Island have long captivated the imagination of archaeologists, historians, and travelers alike. Towering up to 33 feet and weighing as much as 82 tons, these monolithic stone figures stand as solemn guardians of one of humanity's most enduring mysteries. But beneath their iconic heads, those long faces with heavy brows and impassive expressions, lies a secret that has only recently come to light. A secret hidden for centuries beneath layers of volcanic soil and time. In 2012, archaeologists unearthed a remarkable discovery. The Moai statues have full bodies, many of which extend far underground. Far from being mere heads planted in the earth, these statues were sculpted with torsos, and backs that once excavated revealed complex carving symbols and markings etched into the stone. The carvings sparked immediate intrigue. Who created them? Why were they buried? And what do these cryptic symbols mean? To understand the depth of the mystery, we must first understand the setting. Easter Island, known locally as Rapa Nui, is a remote Polynesian island in the southeastern Pacific Ocean, some 2,300 miles from the coast of Chile. The island was settled by the Rapa Nui, people believed to have arrived around the 12th century, though some alternative theories suggest earlier human presence. Over time, these settlers developed a sophisticated society, one capable of carving and transporting the moai, using tools made only of volcanic rock bone and wood. Traditionally, the statues were thought to be memorials to important ancestors, high-ranking chiefs, or spiritual figures. Most face inland, watching over the island's villages, while a few face outward toward the sea, a placement that has long puzzled researchers. But it wasn't until the deeper excavations began that a more complex narrative started to emerge. As teams from the Easter Island Statue Project began carefully uncovering the buried portions of the statues, they found that the backs of many moai were intricately carved with symbols resembling tattoos, crescent moons, waves, and other stylized figures. These symbols were not random decorations, they seemed purposeful, even ritualistic. The presence of these markings raised a profound question. Why would the Rapa Nui go to such lengths to carve hidden details on parts of the statues that would be buried and never seen again? One theory suggests that the carvings were not meant for the living, but for the spirit world. According to Rapa Nui oral traditions, the moai were not just statues, they were vessels for mana, a spiritual force or sacred power believed to inhabit ancestors and nature. Once a moai was completed, it was said to be activated, channeling the mana of the individual it represented. The symbols then may have been spiritual inscriptions, sacred offerings carved directly into the body of the ancestor figure, regardless of whether they would ever be visible again. Another possibility is that the moai were not originally intended to be buried. Over time, due to soil erosion, volcanic activity, and environmental degradation, the statues may have slowly sunk into the earth. If true, this suggests that the Rapa Nui carved their statues in full with the expectation that all of them would remain above ground. But erosion on the volcanic island, exacerbated by deforestation and agriculture, may have slowly entombed the lower halves of these monumental figures. Still, other theories suggest intentional burial, perhaps, as part of a ritual, or to preserve the mana within the statue by grounding it to the earth. If so, the carvings on the hidden portions of the statues could represent a kind of coded language messages for the gods, the earth itself, or future generations. Among the most frequently occurring symbols found on the moai are crescent shapes, which many researchers believe may represent canoes, a vital element of Polynesian life and spiritual identity. The canoe was more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of transition, often associated with both physical voyages across the sea and spiritual journeys between life and death. If the moai were guardians of the soul, protectors of the land, or guides to the afterlife, the canoe's symbolism would make perfect sense. But that's only the beginning of the moai mystery. Equally baffling is the logistics of their construction and transportation. Without the aid of metal tools, cranes, or the wheel, how did an ancient society carve and move these colossal statues, some of which weigh more than a fully loaded 18-wheeler? Theories abound. The most widely accepted explanation is that the Rapa Nui, used a combination of ropes, wooden sleds, and lever systems to walk the statues from the quarry to their final destinations. Experiments have shown that with enough manpower and coordination, a moai can indeed be shifted upright in a rocking motion using ropes. But this still fails to explain the sheer scale of the undertaking, especially considering the island's limited resources. Another compelling theory suggests that the statues were carved directly at the quarry site, decorated with symbols, and then transported while still upright, a feat requiring unimaginable planning and strength. Some oral traditions even hint at the moai moving on their own, aided by the mana of powerful priests, a spiritual explanation that speaks to the depth of belief that infused Rapa Nui culture. Adding further mystery, some moai are topped with red stone hats, known as pukao, made from a lighter volcanic material called red scoria. These hats can weigh up to 10 tons and were somehow lifted atop statues already standing 20 to 30 feet high. The significance of the hats is still debated. Some believe they represent hair top knots, a sign of status, while others think they denote a higher level of spiritual power. So what do all these features, the underground carvings, the intricate transport systems, the hats, the poses, actually tell us? Some scholars argue that the moai were part of a territorial system, massive boundary markers between clan lands. Others believe they were ritual monuments similar in function to the totem poles of Native American cultures. Still others think the moai might have helped with agriculture, perhaps spiritually or practically by marking sources of fertile soil or sacred irrigation channels. Recent studies have even proposed that the placement of moai coincided with fresh water sources, suggesting the statues may have served a functional role in water management as well as a symbolic one. This new interpretation ties together spiritual and environmental purpose, painting the Rapa Nui as engineers and mystics in equal measure. And yet, despite decades of research and excavation, the meaning of the moai remains elusive. The combination of spiritual symbolism, technological mystery, and cultural erasure by colonial forces makes it difficult to reconstruct the true story. Much of Rapa Nui oral tradition was lost or suppressed following European contact, including forced conversion disease and slavery. What remains are fragments, beautiful, haunting fragments of a once thriving civilization that left its story written in stone. Today, the moai continue to stand, some still half-buried, others fully excavated, watching over the island as they have for centuries. Their silent gaze speaks not only of the past, but also of the questions we still must answer. Who carved them? Why are they there? And what, if anything, were they trying to tell us? Perhaps the markings on their backs are part of a message never meant for modern eyes, a message from another time, another way of living, another understanding of the sacred, one that still waits to be deciphered. The Devil's Pool. The whispering waters of death in Australia. Nestled in the rainforest near the town of Babinda in Queensland, Australia lies a deceptively beautiful natural formation known as the Devil's Pool. Surrounded by lush greenery, smooth granite boulders, and crystal-clear water, it seems like an idyllic paradise to the unknowing visitor. But this breathtaking site holds a dark reputation, one cloaked in whispers, legends, and an unsettling death toll. For over a century, the pool has been linked to mysterious drownings, particularly of young men, and local Aboriginal lore speaks of a cursed spirit that inhabits the waters. To this day, many believe the pool is not just dangerous, it is alive, and it calls out to those it wants to claim. The Devil's Pool is part of the Babinda Boulders, a popular swimming and picnic spot formed by thousands of years of water rushing through ancient granite. While the upper areas of the creek are safe for casual visitors, a short walk downstream leads to a narrow passage of rocks and fast-moving water, the infamous Devil's Pool. Here the currents are unpredictable, the channels deceptive, and the rocks polished smooth and slick by millennia of erosion. Even during dry seasons, seemingly calm water can hide powerful undercurrents and suction pockets that trap and pull swimmers beneath the surface. Since official record-keeping began, at least 20 people, almost all of them young men, have died in the Devil's Pool. However, local oral accounts suggest the number may be significantly higher. Many of the deaths are eerily similar. The victim jumps or slips into what appears to be a safe pool, only to be pulled under by an invisible force. Bystanders often report that the water seems to hold on to the body, preventing its recovery for hours or even days. In some cases, divers have had to wait for the water to let go before being able to retrieve the remains. It's as if the pool chooses its victims and refuses to release them easily. This pattern of tragedy has given rise to a deeply rooted Aboriginal legend. According to the Yidinji people, the traditional custodians of the land, the Devil's Pool is the spiritual domain of a woman named Ulana. In life, she was a young woman from their tribe who fell in love with a man from another group named Diga. Their love was forbidden, and when they were caught and separated, Ulana fled into the forest, heartbroken and enraged. She threw herself into the waters of the pool, crying out for her beloved. Her grief and anguish were said to be so powerful that they merged her spirit with the land and water, forever binding her soul to the stream. As the story goes, Ulana still waits in the Devil's Pool, calling out for her lost lover, and when a young man passes by, especially one who reminds her of Daiga, she reaches out, pulling him into the depths to join her. Locals insist that even today, if you listen closely, you can hear her voice echoing through the rocks, a soft, mournful wail just beneath the sound of the rushing water. Whether one believes the legend or not, the consistency of the deaths, particularly among young, fit male visitors, adds weight to the mystery. Authorities have tried for years to explain the phenomena scientifically. They note the unique hydrodynamics of the granite formations, which create swirling vortexes and hydraulic traps beneath the surface. These traps are virtually invisible from above, but act like natural whirlpools, making it almost impossible for a swimmer to escape once caught. Even experienced divers and rescue teams have remarked on the pool's unpredictable nature. One diver described it as the most dangerous piece of water I've ever encountered, while another stated bluntly, "It feels like it doesn't want you there." The location has been thoroughly studied with experts, warning that even standing on certain rocks near the edge can be deadly. A slight slip is all it takes for the water to seize control. Despite numerous signs warning of the danger, the allure of the pool continues to draw visitors, some unaware, others daring fate. Over time, the site has acquired a mythic reputation, not unlike places like Bermuda Triangle or Japan's Aokigahara Forest. It's a place where nature and spirit science and superstition intersect in a chilling dance. It's not just a physical location. It has become a symbol, a reminder that not all beauty is benign and not all danger is visible. Locals often say that the pool chooses its moments. Some days, The water appears inviting serene, a perfect place to cool off on a hot day. Other days, even when there's no storm or flood, the air around the pool feels charged with a heavy, oppressive energy. Indigenous guides speak of this as Ulana's presence growing stronger, as if she's sensing something or someone. They encourage travelers not only to respect the safety rules, but also to show spiritual reverence, to acknowledge the land as sacred and inhabited by forces beyond comprehension. This interplay between legend and loss, between love and death, has inspired various works of art, poems, and even a haunting installation near the site, a plaque listing the names of those who perished. One of the most chilling aspects of the plaque is its inscription: "He came for a visit and stayed forever." For grieving families, the loss is personal, but the way it merges into this larger tapestry of myth gives their sorrow a strange kind of gravity, as if each death becomes part of a continuing story. In recent years, discussions have emerged about whether the Devil's Pool should be closed to the public entirely. Some argue that no amount of signage or barriers can stop thrill seekers or spiritual daredevils. Others say that to close the site would be to erase a vital part of Aboriginal storytelling and sacred geography, treating it as a problem rather than a profound cultural and spiritual place. Indigenous leaders have suggested guided educational tours, ceremonies, and storytelling events as ways to honor the land's power without tempting fate. But perhaps the deepest lesson from the Devil's Pool is this: there are places in the world that defy explanation, places that refuse to be tamed by science or tourism, places that carry memory in waterstone and legend. Whether viewed through the lens of hydrology or mythology, the Devil's Pool remains a liminal space, a boundary between worlds where life, death, and story converge in silence and roar. And so the water flows on, still and rushing, beautiful and brutal, watching, waiting, whispering. Göbekli Tepe, the oldest temple on earth and the secrets buried beneath civilization. Rising from the dusty plains of southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe presents a challenge not only to our understanding of ancient history, but to the very narrative of human civilization. Dating back to nearly 12,000 years ago, this enigmatic site predates the invention of agriculture, writing, and the wheel. It is not merely a collection of old stones, it is a profound disruption in the timeline of humanity. And many believe it holds secrets far beyond what archaeology can uncover, perhaps pointing to a forgotten chapter of spiritual evolution or even a civilization lost in the sands of time. Discovered in the 1990s by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, Göbekli Tepe, meaning Potbelly Hill, was initially thought to be just another natural mound. But what lay beneath changed everything. Excavations revealed massive T-shaped megaliths, some weighing over 20 tons, arranged in intricate circular formations. These stones were deliberately carved, adorned with animal motifs, abstract symbols, and figures that hint at deep cosmological or spiritual meaning. What's astonishing is that the entire structure was purposefully buried around 8000 BCE, and no one knows why. What makes Göbekli Tepe so revolutionary is not just its age, but its complexity. Mainstream historians have long believed that human beings only began building monumental structures after the development of agriculture. The common assumption is, first we learned to farm, then we had food surpluses, which allowed communities to settle and eventually build temples. Göbekli Tepe reverses this order. It suggests that the impulse for spiritual expression may have come first, and the rest of civilization followed, that humans gathered for worship before they gathered for harvest. This possibility shakes the foundation of how we view the birth of religion, community, and consciousness. What could have compelled hunter-gatherers, who were supposedly nomadic and focused only on survival, to undertake such an enormous and coordinated project? The labor involved, the scale of construction, and the artistic sophistication all point toward a people driven by something beyond practicality. They weren't building shelters. They were building something sacred. Göbekli Tepe has been described as the world's first cathedral. But what kind of deity or force were these ancient people trying to commune with? The animal carvings, scorpions, lions, vultures, serpents, suggest a symbolic language, perhaps relating to the sky or to mythic archetypes. One theory links the site to astronomical alignments. Researchers have proposed that the placement of the pillars may correspond to constellations as they appeared in the sky nearly 12,000 years ago, suggesting a level of astronomical knowledge well ahead of its time. Some even speculate that Göbekli Tepe was part of a global sacred science, a network of sites built by a forgotten civilization that understood Earth energies, star cycles, and spiritual geometry. Similar theories have been proposed about places like the Great Pyramids of Egypt, Stonehenge, and Teotihuacan. Could Göbekli Tepe be the missing link, the origin point from which these later traditions emerged? The deeper we look, the stranger the story becomes. As of today, only about 5% of the site has been excavated. Ground-penetrating radar suggests there are dozens more stone circles buried beneath the hill, each potentially older and more complex than the last. And yet the entire site was deliberately entombed in layers of backfill, a process that would have taken enormous effort. It's as if someone wanted to protect it, or hide it, or preserve it for a future time. This deliberate burial raises spiritual and metaphysical questions. What did they know or fear that made them bury their own sacred space? Some propose that it was a ritual closure, marking the end of a cosmic cycle. Others suggest that the builders foresaw a cataclysm. Perhaps the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a controversial theory involving a comet strike around 800 BCE, which could explain global floods, climatic shifts, and the collapse of ancient civilizations. Göbekli Tepe's age also places it just after the end of the last ice age, a time of great upheaval. This leads some to theorize that the site was not built by humans just discovering civilization, but rather by survivors of an earlier advanced culture, trying to preserve their knowledge in stone. In this view, the site becomes less a temple and more a time capsule encoded with symbolic truths about the cosmos, humanity, and the soul's relationship to eternity. Others go further, still seeing Göbekli Tepe as a kind of portal, a spiritual gateway to other realms. The arrangement of the megaliths and the central pair of towering stones in each circle may have represented a passage between the world of the living and the world of the divine. The T-shaped pillars lacking heads and limbs could symbolize celestial beings, perhaps deified ancestors, star beings, or primordial forces beyond language. In this interpretation, the site becomes a staging ground for ritual communion with the unseen, perhaps even a center for ancient mystery schools that guided spiritual awakening long before recorded religion. Whether approached through science, spirituality, or myth, Göbekli Tepe demands humility. It tells us that human history is far older, richer, and stranger than our textbooks allow. It forces us to ask, what have we forgotten? What was once known and is now lost? Are we the apex of human evolution, or merely the survivors of something greater, walking among the ruins of forgotten wisdom? One of the most haunting aspects of Göbekli Tepe is its silence. There are no texts, no names, no king lists or battle records. Just stone, just symbols, just memory carved into earth. And that silence speaks louder than words. It calls us to remember something we can't quite place, an ancestral pull, an echo from the deep soul of humanity before nations, before dogma, before even agriculture. Perhaps the builders of Göbekli Tepe didn't want to leave behind a story. They wanted to leave behind a frequency, a resonance that would awaken future generations. And perhaps that's why the site remained hidden for so long, waiting for the right moment, the right eyes, the right time. Maybe that time is now. The Bell Witch Cave, America's haunted gateway to the spirit world. Hidden in the rolling hills of Adams, Tennessee, lies a modest, unassuming cave that has terrified generations and confounded spiritual investigators for over 2 centuries. Known as the Bell Witch Cave, this place is not just another site of ghostly lore. It is believed by many to be a gateway, a spiritual vortex where the veil between the material world and unseen dimensions is unnaturally thin. What makes the Bell Witch legend endure isn't simply the tale of a haunted family, but the nature of the entity itself. The cave's continuing supernatural phenomena and the unsettling suggestion that what we call reality is far less solid than we believe. The Bell Witch haunting is often regarded as the most thoroughly documented supernatural case in American history. The core of the story begins in the early 1800s with the Bell family who had settled on farmland in Robertson County. It began innocently enough, strange noises in the night, knocking on walls, the sound of chains being dragged across floors, whispers in the dark. But over time, the events escalated in intensity and malevolence. An unseen force began attacking members of the family, particularly young Betsy Bell, who was scratched, pinched, and even slapped by invisible hands. What makes the Bell Witch case so chilling is not just the physical manifestations, but the intelligence of the entity. It spoke in clear English, quoted scripture, sang hymns, and even predicted future events. It claimed various identities over time at one point, calling itself Kate, allegedly the spirit of a local woman who had a grudge against the Bell family. But Kate was only one of many masks. The entity also claimed to be the spirit of a dead Native American, a demon, and at one point, the devil himself. The shifting identity suggests that it was not simply a ghost, but something more complex, a shape-shifting force, a conscious intelligence beyond our categories. As the attacks continued, news of the phenomenon spread. Neighbors, clergy, and even military figures visited the Bell home and reportedly experienced the entity firsthand. According to legend, future President Andrew Jackson once traveled to the farm curious to investigate the rumors. He is said to have witnessed enough to convince him to leave, famously stating, "I'd rather fight the British again than face the Bell Witch." But what binds this strange tale to the physical world is the cave. Located on the Bell property, this small but eerie cave has long been considered the epicenter of the witch's power. Some believe it was her dwelling, others that it is a portal from which she emerged. Countless visitors have reported intense feelings of unease, disorientation, sudden nausea, and even disembodied voices calling their names. Electronics malfunction in the cave. Animals refuse to go near it, and some who mock the legend have been followed home by a string of inexplicable misfortunes, car crashes, illnesses, even death. Unlike many haunted locations, the Bell Witch Cave lacks the theatrical embellishment found in horror films. It is not lined with cobwebs and skeletons. It is quiet, earthy, still, and yet it hums with a density of presence like something is watching or waiting. So what is the Bell Witch? Traditional Christian interpretations saw the entity as a demon, a fallen angel sent to torment the Bell family, perhaps drawn by some hidden sin or spiritual vulnerability. But other views, particularly those influenced by indigenous traditions or spiritualism, suggest it may be a guardian or trickster spirit connected to the land itself. The fact that the Bell property was likely once sacred Native American land adds a deeper layer of complexity. Could the witch be a manifestation of violated memory, a consciousness echoing from desecrated soil? Yet others believe the Bell Witch is not one spirit, but rather a manifestation of collective energy, the psychic byproduct of trauma, fear, and repression. The Bell family was rumored to hold many secrets, harsh discipline, psychological tension, possibly abuse. Some theorists propose that the haunting was a psychogenic event rooted in the subconscious minds of the family members and fueled by the powerful beliefs of the surrounding community. In this view, the witch is less a separate entity and more a mirror of human darkness, a projection of shadow. The cave then becomes a kind of womb of the unconscious, a dark place where hidden truths rise to the surface and demand recognition. In many traditions, caves are places of spiritual initiation, the underworld of myth where the hero must go to confront death and transformation. Christ in the tomb, Buddha under the tree, Muhammad in the cave of Hira. The Bell Witch Cave may represent an American underworld, the shadow side of the nation's optimism and religious fervor. Still others take the mystery further, suggesting that the cave is a geomagnetic anomaly, a place where Earth energies converge and interdimensional contact is possible. This theory holds that the cave is a portal not just to the spirit world, but to parallel realities, and that the witch is a guardian or gatekeeper, aware of who enters and why. Those with open hearts or innocent curiosity may be left alone. Those with mocking intentions or unhealed wounds may be exposed, even punished. Such a view aligns with modern quantum interpretations of consciousness, the idea that reality is not fixed but fluid, and that consciousness shapes experience. If the cave is a liminal space, then the Bell Witch becomes a test of spiritual readiness. What you bring into the cave is what you encounter. Your belief determines your perception. Your fear determines your outcome. Yet no matter the theory, the power of the Bell Witch story lies in its ambiguity. It cannot be easily dismissed, nor can it be neatly explained. It lingers in the American psyche because it represents a truth we intuitively know. There are places where the veil is thinner, where something ancient and unnameable stirs just beyond the reach of science or reason. In that way, the Bell Witch Cave is more than haunted. It is sacred. Not in the sense of holy, but in the sense of terrible and real, a reminder that the world is full of thresholds and that crossing them requires courage, reverence, and the willingness to be changed. If you ever visit, don't go to prove something. Don't go to mock. Go with respect. Go with an open mind. Go prepared to confront parts of yourself that only the darkness can show you. Because perhaps in the end, the Bell Witch is not trying to harm. Perhaps she is simply holding a mirror waiting for you to see what lives behind your own eyes. Dreams, symbols, and synchronicities. The hidden language of the soul. In the quiet of the night, when the world retreats into silence and our conscious minds loosen their grip, something ancient begins to speak. It does not use words, yet it speaks clearly. It does not obey logic, yet it knows truth. It is the language of the soul delivered through dreams, symbols, and synchronicities. To ignore these messengers is to sleepwalk through life. To pay attention to them is to awaken to a higher guidance that whispers constantly beneath the noise of the world. For thousands of years, dreams have been regarded not as meaningless byproducts of brain chemistry, but as divine messages, visions, or spiritual journeys. In cultures from Egypt to Mesopotamia, from Greece to the indigenous Americas, dreams were seen as visits from God's ancestors or even one's higher self. In modern times, we've often reduced dreams to random firings of neurons or echoes of daily stress. But the persistence of archetypal dreams across people and ages, dreams of falling, flying, being chased, losing teeth, meeting a wise figure, suggests something more profound, a collective symbolic intelligence at work. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, believed that dreams were the royal road to the unconscious, but not merely the personal unconscious. He introduced the idea of the collective unconscious, a deep reservoir of shared memory, myth, and image that we all tap into. In this view, dreams are not simply personal, they are transpersonal. A dragon in your dream isn't just a random monster. It may be a symbol of inner transformation, a guardian of treasure that can only be accessed through courage and confrontation. Symbols are the alphabet of the soul. They bypass the rational mind and speak directly to our deeper knowing. A snake may represent fear or healing or transformation depending on your cultural context and emotional state. Water may symbolize emotion, purification, or spiritual rebirth. When we understand the symbolic dimension of reality, the world becomes a sacred text, and everything in it, a flower, a number, a sound, can carry layered meaning. And then there are synchronicities, those seemingly random coincidences that feel far too meaningful to be chance. You think about a person for the first time in months, and they call you that day. You ask for a sign, and a billboard appears with the exact words you needed. You keep seeing the same number, 11-11-3-33-9-11, and begin to wonder, is something trying to get my attention? Jung defined synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence, a connection between inner psychological events and outer physical ones that cannot be explained by cause and effect. He believed synchronicities were expressions of a causal connecting principle rooted in a deeper, ordered universe, where psyche and matter are not separate but entangled. In other words, your inner world and the outer world are mirrors of each other. When you align with your true path, the universe begins to speak to you, not in English, but in the subtle language of signs. This is not magical thinking, it's symbolic thinking, and it requires a kind of spiritual literacy. Just as children must learn to read before they can access books, we must learn to decode our own inner language before we can fully access the wisdom of the soul. That means learning to trust your intuitive responses, paying attention to recurring images, journaling your dreams, and asking yourself, not what does this mean, but what part of my soul is speaking through this. Often dreams offer guidance that the waking mind resists. We may dream of a breakup before it happens, a death before it arrives, or a new opportunity before it's visible. Dreams can confront us with the parts of ourselves we deny: our anger, our lust, our sadness, our unlived lives. These are not nightmares. They are soul interventions. When you ignore them, they grow louder. When you welcome them, they begin to guide you. Synchronicities tend to appear in liminal spaces during transitions, crises, or periods of deep searching. Why? Because it is in those moments that we are most porous, most open to the spiritual realm. When our ego is humbled, our higher self steps in. A car accident, a sudden illness, a divorce. These are often not punishments, but portals, and the signs begin to appear not to control you, but to reveal your path. The soul does not speak in clear answers. It speaks in layers, in riddles, in metaphors. It speaks through the feeling of déjà vu, through the song that comes on at the perfect time, through the recurring dream that won't leave you alone. And while science may try to reduce these to chance, the mystical traditions of the world agree the universe is alive and it is whispering to you all the time. If you want to hear it, slow down, turn off the noise, spend time in nature, keep a dream journal by your bed. Meditate not to escape thought, but to listen beneath it. Pray not to beg, but to connect. Ask the universe a question, then remain still long enough to notice the answer. It might come as a symbol in a dream, or as a stranger's comment, or as a sudden insight that feels like it wasn't yours. The more you honor these messages, the more frequent they become. The world begins to glow with luminosity. You stop seeing events as random and start seeing them as part of a greater tapestry, one that you are not just living in, but co-weaving. There is a reason indigenous shamans, Christian mystics, Sufi poets, and Eastern sages all speak in symbols and stories. The soul doesn't care for facts. It speaks in beauty. It speaks in mystery. It speaks in the language of myth, because myth is what happens when truth transcends logic. To live a soul-guided life is to walk with reverence, to pause before dismissing the dream, to question the timing of that stranger's words, to read the world like a poem. Because when you begin to live this way, the soul speaks louder. Life becomes enchanted, not in the sense of naive fantasy, but in the sense of real participation with the invisible. And you realize you were never alone, you were never lost. You are simply out of tune. And now, by paying attention to your dreams, your symbols, and your synchronicities, you are learning the language of your own becoming. So the next time a crow lands beside you and stares into your eyes, don't brush it off. The next time a dream leaves you trembling, don't dismiss it. The next time life arranges a perfect coincidence, pause and say, "I hear you." Because the soul speaks softly but persistently. And when you learn to listen, life becomes a conversation with the divine, the thin veil. Samhain, All Souls' Day, and the portal between the worlds. There are moments in the turning of the year when the boundary between the seen and unseen thins, and the veil that usually separates the living from the dead becomes porous, translucent. These are sacred times. Not because of superstition, but because for millennia, human beings across cultures have sensed that something real shifts in the air during these thresholds. And the most widely acknowledged of these is Samhain, later known in Christianized tradition as All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, or colloquially, the Season of the Dead. Long before Halloween became a festival of costumes and candy, it was an ancient Celtic holy day, pronounced Samhain, marking the end of the harvest and the start of the new year. But more than just a seasonal marker, Samhain was a spiritual portal, a sacred time when the veil between this world and the other world grew so thin that spirits could cross over and the living could receive messages from beyond. The Celts did not fear this time. They revered it. Fires were lit to guide wandering souls. Ancestors were invited to join the hearth and feast. Divination rituals were performed not out of novelty but necessity because people believed that on Samhain, fate could be seen more clearly, and the spirit world offered wisdom to those brave enough to listen. When Christianity absorbed pagan traditions, Samhain's essence remained, but was transformed into All Saints' Day, Nov 1, and All Souls. Day Nov 2, now times to honor the saints and pray for the souls of the departed in purgatory. Yet beneath the religious framework, the spiritual intuition persisted. This was a time of remembrance, reflection, and connection with the invisible realm. What is it about late October and early November that stirs the soul so deeply? Nature offers a clue. The leaves fall. The light fades, animals begin to hibernate. The outer world turns inward. Death is not hidden, it's everywhere, yet it's beautiful, golden, and poignant. The earth teaches us that decay is sacred and endings are not enemies, but teachers. The falling leaves become a metaphor for our own letting go, and the shortening days invite us to listen inward, to tune into the silence where spirits still speak. In modern life, we are taught to fear death, to run from it, to sterilize it and hide it away. But ancient cultures saw death not as an end, but as a transition, a homecoming, a shift in form. And at certain times of year, especially Samhain and All Souls, the dead were not feared. They were welcomed. This is echoed around the world. In Mexico's Dia de los Muertos, vibrant altars are created not to mourn, but to celebrate the lives of ancestors. Marigolds believed to attract spirits are laid out in bright trails. Food and drink are shared with the dead as if they were still alive, because in a very real sense they are. The idea of the thin veil is more than poetic. Many mystics, psychics, and spiritual practitioners report that energetic thresholds truly shift during these times. Dreams become more vivid. Visions come more easily. Messages from departed loved ones are clearer. There is a hum in the air, a feeling just behind the physical, as if something is brushing against the membrane of this reality, subtle but undeniable. It's not about ghosts in bedsheets or Hollywood horrors. It's about presence, the presence of the past, of soul energy, of memory made sacred. During these days, it's as if time folds in on itself, and those who came before us walk beside us again. Sometimes we feel them in dreams, in sense, in sudden emotions that seem to arrive from nowhere. These are not delusions. They are visitations. But for this magic to reach us, we must create space. We must remember how to be still, how to honor the dead without fear, and how to hold silence long enough to feel their presence. Lighting a candle, speaking their names, preparing a plate for them at the table. These small gestures are powerful acts of spiritual hospitality. They remind us that we are part of an unbroken chain and that death does not sever love. In this way, Samhain and All Souls are not about macabre fascination. They are about integration. They teach us to carry the dead with us, not as burdens, but as guides. Our ancestors are not just in graves. They are in our blood, our breath, our bones. Their choices shape our lives. Their dreams live in us. And sometimes in the quiet of the veil we get to hear them whisper once more. But these days are not only for personal ancestors. They are also a time to mourn the collective dead, those lost in wars, pandemics, injustice, forgotten graves. The veil is thin for all souls, not just those we knew. Lighting a candle on All Souls' Day can be an act of global remembrance, a prayer that the souls of the restless may find peace and that we may never forget the cost of forgetting. In this thinning of the veil there is also a mirror. As we face death outside of us, we are invited to contemplate death within. What must die in us to make room for the new? What habits, fears, or stories are we ready to bury? The spiritual power of this time lies not just in contacting the dead, but in allowing parts of ourselves to die so that new life may emerge come spring. This is the sacred rhythm, life, death, rebirth. And the veil reminds us that these are not separate stages but interwoven dimensions. The dead are not gone, they are changed. And we are not separate from them. We are part of a cycle that includes them. So as the veil thins this season, consider honoring it consciously. Create a space of memory. Light a fire or a candle. Speak the names of the departed. Write a letter to a loved one who has crossed. Sit in silence. Let the unseen world speak. Don't rush it. Don't demand answers. Just open the door and wait. Because in the quiet of these threshold days, the soul knows its way. And the dead, if we let them, may lead us not into fear, but into reverence. For when we honor the thin veil, we begin to realize death is not the opposite of life. It is its mirror, its companion, its teacher. And from this sacred understanding we live more deeply, more truthfully, and more gratefully aware that every moment is both a birth and a farewell, both a leaf falling and a root growing deeper. Soul contracts and the divine blueprint. Did you choose your life before birth? It's a question that stirs something ancient within us. Did I choose this life? Not just its joys and triumphs, but also its wounds, heartbreaks and challenges. Could it be that before we entered this body, before we cried our first cry, we agreed to it all? The idea of soul contracts and a divine blueprint is not merely spiritual romanticism. It appears across cultures, philosophies, and esoteric traditions, each echoing the same core truth. The soul is not a passive victim of fate, but an active participant in its incarnation. What happens to us is not random. It is part of a sacred design often co-created in realms beyond time. In the Tibetan and Vedic traditions, there is the concept of karmic planning, where the soul, between lifetimes, reviews its past actions and makes decisions for the next life. To balance karma, evolve spiritually, and aid others. This echoes the ancient Greek notion of the anamnesis, the soul's recollection of eternal truth it knew before birth. In Christian mysticism, saints have spoken of pre-birth agreements made in heavenly realms, and in modern spiritual literature, particularly accounts from near-death experiences and spiritual regressions, people often recall making soul choices before entering this world. Imagine it. Before you were born, you stood in a place of light, surrounded by guides, elders, perhaps even the souls of those who would become your parents, your siblings, your enemies, and your great loves. You looked at a tapestry, not just of your life, but of how your life would touch others, how every experience could serve the expansion of the soul. And in that space of higher awareness, you said, yes. I choose this. You may have chosen to be born into a family where love was scarce, to learn the alchemy of self-worth. You may have chosen betrayal so you could awaken discernment. You may have chosen physical limitation to cultivate compassion, or wealth to learn generosity. Every soul contract is unique, mysterious, and often incomprehensible from the narrow view of the human mind. But from the soul's perspective, it's all a classroom, one that teaches through experience, pain, beauty, and contrast. This perspective doesn't dismiss suffering. It doesn't spiritualize abuse or say, "You asked for this," in a dismissive way. On the contrary, it invites radical empathy and deep responsibility. It says your pain is real, but so is your power. You are not here by accident. There is meaning embedded in the chaos, a sacred pattern unfolding even in what seems most unjust. The concept of soul contracts is closely tied to the idea of soul families and karmic partners. Before birth, it is said that we often make agreements with other souls to meet again in this lifetime, to play roles for each other, to trigger growth, to reflect wounds, to complete unfinished lessons. Sometimes the person who hurts you most deeply is also the one who loved you most profoundly on the soul level and agreed to help you evolve, even if it meant being the villain in your story. This does not mean you must remain in toxic situations or romanticize suffering, but it does mean that nothing and no one is entirely random. Every relationship may carry a hidden spiritual signature, a message, a mission. And sometimes, once that mission is complete, the contract dissolves. This is why people suddenly fall away from our lives, or why a devastating loss can precede a spiritual awakening. The contract has fulfilled its purpose, and the soul moves forward. But how can we know what our soul contracts are? One way is through intuition, those deep inner nudges that certain events, places, or people feel strangely familiar. Another way is through spiritual regression therapies that access the subconscious and bring forward memories of pre-birth planning. People have reported astonishing experiences seeing themselves choose their body gender location and even timelines of illness or loss, all for the purpose of learning something essential. Another path is through observation and reflection. Patterns repeat for a reason. If you've faced the same type of betrayal in different forms or find yourself drawn to the same kind of teacher or lesson, it may indicate a soul contract asking to be acknowledged, understood, and transcended. But perhaps the most profound insight comes not from trying to decode every detail, but from embracing the present moment as exactly where you're meant to be. Soul contracts are not only about the past. They are alive, unfolding in real time. Every choice you make, every response you give has the power to fulfill or rewrite the contract. You are not a prisoner of fate. You are a co-creator. The divine blueprint is not a rigid script, but a living design, like a song with fixed melodies and infinite improvisations. The soul may choose the main chords before birth, but how you dance to them is your free will. That's the paradox. You chose this life, and you are choosing it now, moment by moment. This understanding is profoundly healing. It reframes struggle as sacred. It restores agency to the wounded. It reveals that your deepest challenges may contain the seeds of your greatest gifts. And most of all, it invites you to live not in fear, but in alignment, to remember why you came and to walk your path with conscious reverence. So did you choose your life before birth? Perhaps not every detail, but yes, you chose the essence, the themes, the pivotal turning points, the souls you would meet, the love you would give, the losses that would break you open, the fires that would forge you, the missions that would matter. You chose this incarnation not to suffer blindly, but to awaken, to remember, and to embody a piece of the divine in human form. And in that remembering, you reclaim your power, not just as a person living a life, but as a soul fulfilling a sacred agreement with every breath, every wound, and every moment of grace. How to help the dead. Prayers, rituals, and the energy of remembrance. The journey of the soul does not end at death. It continues often silently and invisibly through realms that the living cannot see but can certainly feel. And in this sacred transition, the living still have a role to play. We are not helpless observers watching from the other side of a veil. We are bridges. We are witnesses. And more importantly, we are participants in the soul's crossing from one dimension to another. For centuries across cultures and continents, humans have intuitively known that the dead still need us. Prayers, rituals, offerings, and most powerfully remembrance were not just for comfort. They were tools to support the departed in their journey beyond the veil. They were expressions of love that transcended time. They were sacred acts that touched not only the soul of the deceased, but also cleansed and elevated the souls of those left behind. But how exactly does it work? The soul, after leaving the physical body, often remains in a transitional state, a liminal space between the worlds. In Tibetan Buddhism, this is known as the bardo, a space where the soul processes its life, releases attachments, and prepares for what comes next, whether that's reincarnation, ascension, or integration into higher realms. In Christian theology, there's the concept of purgatory, a realm of purification. In African traditions, the ancestors are ever present, watching, guiding, and sometimes needing resolution from those still on earth. What unites all these traditions is the belief that the soul's journey is not finished at death, and that we, the living, have a spiritual responsibility to support them. One of the most powerful ways to help the dead is through intentional prayer. Not just recited words, but prayers spoken from the soul, words of love, forgiveness, gratitude, and peace. These prayers act like energetic lanterns in the dark, lighting the path for a soul that may be lost, confused, or weighed down by regrets. Your intention sends waves into the unseen waves that remind the soul you are not alone, you are not forgotten, you are still loved. Sometimes what the soul needs most is not lofty ritual, but release. If you're holding on to anger, blame, or unfinished business with the departed, your energy may tether them to earth. They may feel compelled to linger, trying to explain, make amends, or offer protection. In such cases, the most profound gift you can give is forgiveness, spoken not for their benefit alone, but for your mutual liberation. Forgiveness is a cutting of cords, a clearing of karmic threads, a return to peace. Another way to help the dead is through ritual, lighting a candle with a spoken intention, creating an altar with their photograph and favorite objects, visiting a grave not to mourn, but to speak softly into the air, offering flowers, incense, or food not as superstition, but as acts of energetic communion. Ritual gives form to the formless. It translates the abstract language of spirit into symbols the soul can recognize. In many traditions, there are specific days or windows of time believed to be especially thin when the veil between the worlds grows more transparent. Days like All Souls' Day, Dia de los Muertos, or during certain moon phases. In these sacred periods, the energy of remembrance is amplified. Even a simple gesture, writing their name on paper, speaking their story aloud, playing their favorite music, can reach across dimensions. But what happens when someone dies tragically, violently, or suddenly? These souls often need extra support. They may not yet realize they've passed. They may carry trauma or deep emotional residue. For these souls, your presence is like a beacon. Sit in meditation, visualize them surrounded by light, and speak calmly from the heart. You are safe. You are loved. You are free to move on. This gentle invocation can do more than you might ever know. In the silence of your room, a soul may finally find peace. And what of those who died alone? Unloved, forgotten, you can adopt them in spirit, speak their names if you know them, or simply say, "To all those who have died in loneliness, may you feel remembered now." Love transcends biology and time. A stranger's prayer can reach a soul just as powerfully as that of family. In this way, we become spiritual midwives, helping the dead find their way, not through religion, but through love. There is also a powerful energy in storytelling, telling their stories, who they were, what they taught you, what you wish you had said, breathes life into their memory. It affirms their existence and anchors their legacy in this world. Stories are vessels. Every time we speak of the dead with reverence, we lift them higher. But helping the dead is not only about them, it also heals us. In the act of remembrance, we soften our grief. In offering prayers, we open the heart. In forgiving, we unburden our own soul. The rituals are mutual. They help the dead ascend and the living grow. It is a sacred exchange, a spiritual ecology. Love circulates across dimensions. And there's one more truth: the dead often help us too. After death, many souls take on new roles as protectors, guides, and silent companions. Their wisdom deepens, their perspective widens. They may send dream signs or a sudden warmth when you're alone. They may inspire new paths or help you avoid harm, but they cannot intervene without your openness. To invite their presence, you must quiet the mind and open the heart. You must say, "I remember you. I welcome your guidance. Show me the way." Death does not break the bond. It simply changes the channel. So let us honor our dead, not only with grief, but with reverence. Let us speak their name, share their wisdom, and offer them peace. Let us forgive what needs forgiving. Let us love them as if they are still near, because in truth they are. And in doing so, we become more than just mourners. We become keepers of the flame. Why some souls refuse to reincarnate, the pain of earth and the choice of return. Reincarnation is often spoken of as a cycle, a wheel that turns through lifetime after lifetime, each rotation meant to refine the soul, to cleanse karmic residue, to bring us closer to truth. Yet within this cycle there are mysteries not easily explained. Not every soul returns. Some delay, some refuse, and some choose to stay away from the earth altogether. Why, the answer lies not just in theology or metaphysics, but in pain, in memory, in choice. Earth, for all its beauty, is also a realm of density, violent separation, and sorrow. Here souls are enclosed in flesh, time-bound and limited, often confused and cut off from the eternal clarity of the divine realms. In spirit, we are luminous. On earth, we forget. We are born into trauma shaped by fear, and often wounded before we can even speak. For many souls, the idea of returning to this realm again and again is not embraced lightly. It is weighed. It is felt deeply. In the in-between after death, but before potential rebirth, the soul often undergoes a life review. This is not punishment. It is not judgment in the human sense. Rather, it is a luminous confrontation with one's choices, intentions, and impact. The soul sees not only what it did, but how its actions rippled through others. The tears it caused, the love it withheld, the kindness it offered. and for some this revelation is overwhelming. They do not wish to repeat the pain. They are afraid they will fail again. They are weary of the struggle. This is especially true for souls who have endured extreme suffering, war, famine, slavery, genocide, abandonment, abuse. These souls often carry trauma, not just in their human memory, but in their spiritual field. And while the soul is capable of healing, there is sometimes a period of hesitation, a spiritual paralysis born from fear. They hover in the spiritual realms, watching healing, waiting but refusing to return to the battlefield of human life. Some souls, particularly those who were deeply awakened before death, may also refuse reincarnation because they have completed what they came to do. Earth was their school, their crucible. And now, having mastered what they needed, compassion, forgiveness, courage, love, they no longer need to return. These are often referred to in esoteric traditions as liberated souls, or moksha-attained beings, or ascended consciousnesses. They remain in the higher realms, not in avoidance, but in fulfillment. Yet others refuse not because they are finished, but because they are disillusioned. These souls may have attempted to make a difference on earth, spreading love, truth, healing, and were betrayed, silenced, martyred, or misunderstood. They remember how the world rejected what they came to offer. They feel the sting of being cast out, ridiculed, or destroyed by the very people they were trying to help. This kind of soul wound can turn into spiritual resistance. Why should I return to a world that spits on light? It's not that they lack love, but that they fear the pain of giving it again. In some cases, souls also choose to stay away because of attachments to the spirit realm itself. The afterlife for many is a realm of beauty, colors, sounds, and sensations far beyond the earthly senses. Reunions with loved ones, access to divine knowledge, a sense of peace and wholeness unimaginable in human form. To return to earth then feels like a kind of exile, and yet earth needs souls. It is through incarnation that the divine expresses itself in form. It is through return that the soul gets to apply wisdom to transmute old karma to help others awaken. Many higher beings, angels, guides, even liberated souls eventually choose to return, not for themselves, but for us, out of compassion, out of love, out of service. These are the bodhisattvas, the Christed ones, the ancient souls who walk again among us, hidden in ordinary clothes, whispering truth in the chaos. For a soul to return, it must choose vulnerability again. It must choose amnesia again. It must choose pain, knowing that pain teaches. This is no small decision. Sometimes between lives, a soul will be approached by its soul group beings it has incarnated with many times before. These are spiritual brothers and sisters, sometimes lovers, children, parents, across lifetimes. They may encourage the soul to return, not as punishment, but to fulfill collective contracts, to help one another grow. In these moments, the soul may finally say, yes, not because earth has become less painful, but because love has become greater. Free will is never taken away. No soul is forced to return, but many are lovingly guided back not by compulsion, but by resonance. There are also rare cases where souls refuse reincarnation but are still drawn close to earth. They linger. They hover near their loved ones. They watch, whisper, intervene. These are what some might call ghosts, but in truth many are simply souls who are not yet ready, still tethered by grief, guilt, or love. They are waiting, not lost, not damned, just in transition, The soul's refusal to return should never be judged. It is not a sign of failure or darkness. It is a sacred pause, a moment of cosmic breath, and sometimes in that pause the soul hears a calling, a prayer, a child in need, a dream not yet fulfilled, and the soul remembers not the pain, but the purpose, and with courage it says yes. Because earth, for all its wounds, is also a place of miracles. A kiss in the dark, a laugh shared under stars, a stranger's kindness, the smell of bread baking, the birth of a child, the feel of rain, the sound of music. These are things the soul can only experience in flesh. And sometimes that is enough reason to return. In the grand scheme, the refusal to reincarnate is part of the soul's freedom. But so too is the eventual return, not as a burden, but as a choice, a gift. So if you feel you are an old soul, if you've known lifetimes before, if you carry a spiritual fatigue, you are not alone. Your reluctance is understood. Your scars are seen. But also know this, you are needed here, not forever, but for now. And in your choosing, earth remembers heaven again. The first soulmate after death, who waits for you on the other side. One of the most comforting beliefs across spiritual traditions is the idea that death is not a lonely journey. Instead, it is a return, a homecoming. And standing at the threshold of that return, many souls report meeting someone deeply familiar, not just a guide, not just an angel, but a soulmate. The first face seen in the afterlife is often that of someone beloved beyond words, a being whose presence dissolves fear and floods the soul with memory. I know you. I've always known you. Who is this being? It may not always be the one we loved most romantically in life. It might not even be someone we expected. But this first greeter is almost always someone deeply bonded to our soul, a soulmate from eternity, whose thread has been woven into the fabric of our existence across lifetimes. Often, this is the one who promised to meet us when the veil lifted, the one who vowed, "When it's your time, I'll be there." Sometimes this first soul is a parent who passed before us, a grandparent who held us as infants, a child we lost too soon, a mentor who believed in us, a best friend who understood us like no one else. But in the spiritual realm, relationships are not defined by human labels. What binds us is energy, memory, purpose, a love older than time. This greeter may have shared dozens of lifetimes with us. In one life, they were our sibling. In another, our enemy. In another, our lover. Soulmates often play many roles throughout the cycles, not because life is arbitrary, but because love takes every shape necessary to awaken us. By the time we reunite, there is no need for words. The connection is instant, luminous, undeniable. In near-death experiences, countless people describe this moment. A light, a presence, an overwhelming sense of peace, and then a familiar face smiling. Even those who didn't believe in life after death often say the same thing: I wasn't alone. Someone was there. I recognized them. I just knew. This first soulmate doesn't come just to greet us. They come to guide us, to reassure us, to help us transition gently from the density of the earth into the subtle beauty of the spirit world. They walk us across that first bridge, showing us that we are safe, that we are loved, that we are still ourselves, and more. For those who die suddenly or in fear, this reunion is especially healing. The soulmate's presence becomes an anchor, a balm, a reminder that death is not an ending but a shift, that we are not lost, we are found again, that even in death we are loved into wholeness. In spiritual teachings across cultures, we find echoes of this truth. In Christianity, it's spoken that the faithful are welcomed by Christ or angels, but also by loved ones who passed before them. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo journey is often aided by familiar beings of light who come to ease fear. In African and indigenous traditions, the ancestors await with open arms. In Sufi mysticism, the soul is greeted by the beloved, the mirror of divine love. All of these point to a deeper reality that love survives death and that it reaches across the veil to welcome us home. Sometimes this soulmate is not just a single individual, but part of a soul group, a small cluster of beings who incarnate together, life after life, helping one another grow. Within that group, there is usually one who feels like home more than the others. That one often becomes our first contact upon death. Their energy, their presence is a spiritual signature we cannot forget, even if we couldn't consciously remember them on Earth. This reunion is more than emotional. It is also restorative. Earth wears us down. We become scattered, traumatized, disoriented. But the soulmate who greets us acts as a mirror, reflecting back to us who we really are, whose soul eternal radiant, never alone. And for some, this moment is the most profound love they have ever felt, a kind of soul recognition that transcends all earthly passion. It is not just romantic, it is cosmic. It is as if every cell of our being says, "I'm back. I remember now. I remember you." This also explains why many people, especially those with strong intuition or psychic sensitivity, feel as if someone is waiting for them on the other side, someone they haven't met yet in this life, but whose presence they sense in dreams, meditations, or deep moments of silence. That soul is real. That bond exists beyond time. And when the veil lifts, the connection will become visible. For some, the idea of being greeted by a soulmate upon death brings immense peace. It removes the fear of the unknown. It replaces anxiety with anticipation. It reminds us that death does not steal love. It reveals it, that the person meant for us may not always appear during this life, but they will be there when it ends. And for those left behind on Earth, this idea can be healing. Knowing that our loved one was not alone when they crossed over, that someone was waiting for them, someone who knew them deeply, can bring comfort amidst grief. It is not just a poetic idea. It is a spiritual truth whispered across centuries, affirmed by mystics, dreamers, and those who have touched the edge of the beyond. So when your time comes, and it will, as it does for all, trust that you will not enter the dark alone. Someone will be there. Perhaps someone you knew. Perhaps someone you only knew in dreams. But they will be there, holding out a hand, smiling with the eyes of eternity, calling you by your real name. And in that moment, everything you feared will fall away. Because love never forgets, and your soulmate never stopped waiting. The most dangerous day after death, the temptation to stay. Stuck in desire, there is a strange and perilous moment in the early stages of the soul's journey. After death, one that few talk about, yet many spiritual teachings warn against. It is the day when desire reawakens, when the soul, no longer bound by the body, begins to feel the lingering pull of the earth pleasures, not fulfilled attachments, not released sensations once craved, but now unreachable. This moment, subtle and quiet, may be the most dangerous day after death. In Eastern philosophy, especially in Tibetan Buddhism's Bardo Thodol, this temptation is described in vivid detail. After death, the soul passes through various stages of clarity and confusion. One of the first challenges it faces is the temptation to cling to people, to cravings, to unfinished fantasies. Though the physical senses are gone, the energetic imprints remain. The soul remembers what it liked, the touch of a lover, the taste of wine, the thrill of power, the comfort of control. These desires do not vanish with death. They linger in the astral sheath. And if the soul is not vigilant, it can become trapped in them. Imagine a soul hovering above the world, newly freed from the body. It begins to feel weightless, expansive, but then like an echo. A voice calls, "I never got to say goodbye. I never felt real love. I never had enough." These aren't just thoughts. They are magnetic forces pulling the soul back into the field of human craving. Some traditions call this earth-binding desire. It is not malicious, it is simply unfinished. The soul may become so fixated on an unresolved craving, a person, an experience, a wound, that it resists moving forward. It may try to influence the physical world, appearing in dreams, causing disturbances, or attaching itself to people it once knew. These are the restless dead, not evil, but stuck, trapped, not by demons, but by their own yearning. In Christian mysticism, this stage has parallels with purgatory, a place not of punishment, but of purification. Souls who live deeply immersed in physical pleasure, vanity, or greed often must face the residue of those desires. Not because God is cruel, but because the soul itself must choose to release its lower impulses to rise. And sometimes the soul is not ready. It still wants to taste, touch, possess. This is the tragedy. Even in death one can cling, and clinging delays transformation. Many esoteric texts suggest that the first 7 to 40 days after death are crucial, because this is when the soul is closest to the earthly plane, still vibrating at a frequency between the physical and the spiritual. It has not fully crossed over. In this liminal state, desire is amplified, but so is choice. The soul must decide, will I let go of what I once craved, or will I orbit the earth, hoping for one more taste of life? If the soul chooses to let go, it begins to rise into clarity, into peace, into its true form. But if it chooses to remain, it enters a kind of energetic stagnation. It cannot reincarnate, nor can it ascend. It becomes a ghost, not the dramatic kind from movies, but a consciousness in limbo, longing without fulfillment, watching without touching, knowing without being able to change. This is why so many traditions emphasize detachment before death. The soul that practices letting go in life will find it easier to do so in death. It will not be as easily seduced by phantom desires. It will recognize the illusion and walk past it. But the soul that lived only for pleasure, control, or fear, that soul may be caught in its own echo. Near-death experiences often include moments where people are shown visions of temptation. Some describe being offered a choice to return, to remain, or to move forward. The pull to return is not always rooted in love. It can be rooted in unfinished addiction to the material realm. The feeling of wanting to fix something, control someone, or experience a final pleasure can create a magnetic gravity that keeps the soul close to earth. The longer it lingers, the harder it is to move on. But all is not lost. Even in this most dangerous moment, help is available. Higher beings, ancestors, and guides surround the soul, gently encouraging it to let go. They do not judge, but they do warn. They show the soul its true light, its origin beyond craving, and if the soul listens even for a moment, it can break free. This is also why prayer and ritual from the living matter so much in the days after someone dies. It's not just for comfort. It's a spiritual lifeline. Every whispered prayer, every candle lit, every tear shed with love helps remind the soul. You are more than your desires. You are more than your regrets. You are free. In many cultures, the living offer food, music, or messages to the dead, not to appease them, but to guide them, helping them release the last hooks of the earth. So if you've lost someone, speak to them in the early days. Not with grief, but with hope. Tell them it's okay to go. We'll be all right. You are free now. Follow the light. Let go of the pain. These words carry weight. They pierce the veil, and sometimes they are the very thing that helps a soul choose freedom. And for yourself, begin letting go now. Not of life, but of attachment. Practice dying before death. Release the need to control. Heal the old wounds. Love without clinging. Enjoy without addiction. These are not just spiritual platitudes. They are preparation for the final test, the day when desire comes knocking after you've left your body. Will you answer, or will you smile, gently remembering that the real banquet lies beyond? That is the challenge of the most dangerous day after death. And the ones who pass it become free not just of earth, but of the illusions that bound them for lifetimes. They rise not as victims of craving, but as masters of their soul. And that truly is the beginning of real life. How to say goodbye and cross the gate of peace. There comes a moment in the soul's post-mortem journey when everything quiets. The illusions dissolve, the attachments fade, the voices of desire, regret, identity, and memory begin to fall silent like echoes fading into a distant canyon. In this stillness, the soul stands before something it has long forgotten, the gate of peace. It is not a gate in the physical sense, but an energetic threshold, a portal that separates the clinging winds of earth from the calm clarity of higher realms. And to cross it, the soul must learn the sacred art of saying goodbye. Saying goodbye is not simply about departure, it is about surrender. It is about acknowledging that the chapter of one life is complete. The gate does not demand perfection, only honesty. The soul must let go not only of the world, but of its own illusions about what it was, what it thought it needed, and who it believed it had to be. This moment is more intimate than death itself. For here the soul says goodbye, not just to others, but to the version of itself that once walked the earth. In ancient Egyptian texts, the deceased is brought before the scales, where their heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth. The heart must be light, not because it has never made mistakes, but because it is free from attachment, bitterness, and falsehood. This allegory points toward a deeper spiritual truth. The lightness of heart is the key to passing through the final threshold. It is the soul's readiness to walk without burden. But how does one say goodbye to a lifetime? For many souls, this is not easy. Even after death, the mind clings to unfinished conversations, to grief left unspoken, to the desire to be remembered, or even to be forgiven. The soul may long to revisit places it once loved, to see the face of a child, or to feel the warmth of the sun once more. These impulses are not wrong, but they are echoes. And to cross the gate of peace, the soul must learn to distinguish the echo from the eternal. This is why so many sacred traditions place importance on rituals of farewell. In some cultures, candles are lit for 40 days to guide the spirit. In others, names are read aloud in prayer. Some people write letters to the dead, while others simply sit in silence and offer love. These acts are not just for the grieving, they are signposts for the soul. They say, "You are loved, you are remembered, but you are free now." Freedom is the true destination of the soul, and yet not all souls recognize it at first. Some stand at the threshold and hesitate. They fear that crossing means forgetting. Others are simply too exhausted to choose. After a life of struggle, guilt, or fear, even peace can feel foreign. These souls may linger at the gate, unsure whether they are worthy, but always there is guidance. A being of light, a familiar presence, or an overwhelming sense of love often arrives at this moment, not to push, but to invite. They say with no words, "Come." It is time. And when the soul finally chooses, when it lets go of its name, its stories, its wounds, it crosses. And what lies beyond cannot be fully spoken. It is not a place, but a state of being vast, calm, luminous. The gate of peace leads to a realm of clarity where there is no time, no judgment, only understanding. Many mystics describe this realm as the beginning of true healing, a kind of spiritual afterglow where the soul begins to remember its original essence untouched by earth's illusions. Here the soul does not lose itself. It finds itself. Some may call this place heaven, others the summer land or the realm of light. But all agree the key to entering is surrender. Not weakness, but the surrender of control, the humility to accept the mystery, the courage to trust the process of release. And yet this journey is not passive. The act of saying goodbye is a spiritual discipline. It can begin long before death, and in fact it must. A soul that has practiced letting go in life will find the crossing far more graceful. Those who have made peace with their past, forgiven others, released resentments, and embraced impermanence are often seen crossing with light in their step. Their transition is not one of loss, but of reunion. This is why teachers like Jesus the Buddha Rumi and countless sages emphasized detachment, forgiveness, and presence. They were not preparing us to live less, they were preparing us to die well. And to die well is to live wisely. When you know that you must one day say goodbye to everything you begin to love, without clinging work, without obsessing, and breathe with gratitude. So how do we practice this now? We begin by examining what we are afraid to lose. Are there people, possessions, roles, or ideas we hold so tightly that the thought of letting them go terrifies us? These are not sins, but signposts. They show us where we have not yet trusted the eternal. Saying goodbye is not about coldness. It is about trust. It says, even if this ends, I am whole. Even if I walk alone, I am loved. Even if I vanish, I belong to something greater. To prepare for the gate of peace is not to deny life. It is to honor it fully, knowing it is temporary. It is to drink every moment deeply, and yet to be ready to release the cup when it is time. Some souls, upon crossing the gate, are shown their life as a tapestry. Every joy and sorrow, every failure and triumph weave together into a magnificent design. And suddenly, everything makes sense. The pain had a purpose. The delays were lessons, the losses were initiations, and the love, that fragile, fleeting human love, was real and eternal all along. This realization is the true reward of crossing the threshold. Not reward in a moral sense, but in a metaphysical one, the reward of remembrance, of knowing you were never separate, never unloved, never truly lost. So in life practice saying goodbye gently, not in bitterness, but in reverence. Let each ending be a teacher. Let each farewell prepare your soul for that final gate. For when it comes, and it will come, your only task will be to step through it with peace in your heart. And when you do, you will not vanish. You will become more real than ever before. What the soul sees before it forgets. There is a sacred moment just before the soul passes beyond the veil of memory, before it merges with higher planes, reincarnates, or rests in realms of healing. It is called the final vision, and it is unlike anything the soul has ever seen before. It is not a hallucination nor a fantasy, but a panoramic unveiling, a divine remembering of everything that ever mattered, shown in a way that only a liberated soul can comprehend. This vision is not projected onto a screen or told as a story. It rises from within like an awakening of knowledge that had always been buried beneath layers of forgetting. And in this moment, the soul sees not only its own life, but the hidden meaning behind it. All the lessons, the intersections, the echoes of impact that reached further than it ever knew. The final vision is different for every soul, but there are patterns. Often, the soul sees the people it loved, not just as bodies and names, but as souls, two eternal beings with whom it made sacred contracts before birth. It sees the wounds it caused, but also the ways those wounds led others toward awakening. It sees the kindnesses it offered, even the ones it had forgotten, now shining with cosmic significance. Nothing is wasted. Not a tear, not a mistake, not a moment of wonder. Everything is held in light. There is no judgment in this vision, only clarity. The soul is not punished for what it failed to do, nor is it rewarded in the way we often imagine. Rather, it is shown the truth, what it came to learn, what it resisted, what it embraced, and what remains incomplete. This is not a report card, it is a map, a sacred mirror. And in this mirror, the soul is invited to understand itself not from ego, but from essence. This is when many souls weep not from shame, but from recognition, from the overwhelming beauty of seeing their life through the eyes of divine wisdom. Even the moments they hated most are now wrapped in deeper meaning. Even the losses they thought would break them are now revealed as doorways to grace. Sometimes the final vision expands to show previous lives. The soul sees echoes of itself across different eras, genders, and cultures. It realizes that it has worn many masks and played many roles, always in service of growth. It understands that karma is not a punishment, but a law of balance and refinement, and that nothing is ever random. Every meeting, every delay, every ending was part of a sacred choreography. But the most mysterious part of the final vision is what comes just before forgetting. Because after this moment of pure remembrance, the soul must release it all. If the soul is preparing to reincarnate or to move into a realm where earthly memories must dissolve, it is gently guided into a kind of spiritual amnesia. Not to erase who it is, but to allow for new experiences to unfold without the heavy burden of remembrance. In this way, forgetting becomes a blessing. This is why some people, even in life, have strange intuitions about people they've never met, places they've never seen, or lessons they seem to already know. These are whispers from the final vision, left like breadcrumbs in the soul. The forgetting is never total. Some fragments survive embedded in dreams, instincts, fears, and longings. There are rare souls who remember more. Children who speak of other lifetimes. Mystics who return from near death with stories of a luminous review. But for most, the final vision remains hidden until the moment of transition. So why is it given at all? Because the final vision is not only a review, it is a gift, a final act of love from the soul's higher self, offering reassurance before the next chapter begins. It is the universe saying, you mattered, you learned, you are never alone. It is also the soul's opportunity to say yes, to affirm its path, to take full ownership of its choices, not in guilt but in awareness. This is the foundation of true spiritual maturity. Some souls, upon seeing their vision, make vows. They commit to return with greater compassion or to remain in the higher realms to assist others. Others choose rest, healing, or solitude in spiritual realms before continuing. This vision also prepares the soul for its next identity. Whether it reincarnates, ascends, or joins the ranks of spiritual guides, the final vision ensures that it does so with intention. No soul moves forward blindly. Even if it forgets what it chose, it did choose. And this choice was made in full view of its eternal truth. And what does the final vision feel like? Those who've touched it describe a love that is unbearable in its tenderness. A light so clear, it feels like being seen for the first time. A silence so deep it holds the sound of every prayer. It is the soul's encounter with the blueprint of its own becoming a vision so complete that there are no more questions, only peace. For those of us still living, this concept is not just metaphysical poetry. It is a call to live with vision now. To ask, if I were to see the truth behind my life today, what would I see? What would I change? What would I finally forgive? The knowledge that a final vision awaits us can inspire us to be more awake, more present, more kind. Because we are not just living, we are composing a masterpiece that one day we will view with sacred eyes. So live as if your life is being woven into a tapestry. Speak words you will be proud to remember. Love people as if the soul will one day review that love in full light. And know that nothing, truly nothing, is insignificant. At the edge of memory, the soul sees. And then it lets go. And the silence that follows is not emptiness, but the space in which something new can be born, the soul's new beginning. Choosing the next path. After the final vision fades into stillness, the soul enters a sacred moment of pause. This space is not defined by time or urgency, but by clarity and freedom. It is here, in this silence of completion, that the soul begins to sense the weight and possibility of the next chapter. What lies ahead is not a punishment nor a reward, but a choice, a new beginning. This is one of the most mysterious and awe-inspiring truths of the soul's journey. We choose what comes next. Not always in the way the ego imagines, but from a higher state of awareness that transcends fear, desire, or egoic preference. This choice emerges from the soul's deepest longing to evolve, to love better, to serve more fully, or to simply rest. Some souls, after intense lives marked by suffering or exhaustion, choose restorative states, realms of light, healing, and solitude. These are not punishments or limbos, but temples of stillness where the soul can heal from spiritual wounds, integrate past traumas, and remember how to feel whole again. There is no clock ticking in these spaces. There is only love. Other souls feel a burning pull to return. They see in the aftermath of the final vision where they wish to grow next, what fear they long to overcome, what karma they feel called to balance, or what gift they want to bring into the world. And so they choose to incarnate again with intention. This decision is not forced, It is an inner knowing that this is what I need next. Before any return to embodiment, the soul may be guided through the hall of choices, a realm not of judgment, but of sacred planning. Here it may meet with spiritual guides, soul family members, or higher aspects of itself. It reviews options for its next life not in terms of status or luxury, but in terms of spiritual significance. What lessons would best serve its evolution? What relationships will catalyze growth? What challenges are needed to refine its essence? Sometimes the soul chooses a life that from a human perspective may seem difficult, marked by poverty, illness, or rejection. But from the soul's view, these experiences are often accelerators of awakening. They are opportunities to cultivate compassion, resilience, humility, or love without condition. The soul sees the world not through the lens of comfort, but through the lens of transformation. Likewise, a soul may choose a life of beauty, wealth, or visibility, not to indulge in pleasure, but to learn how to remain awake in comfort, how to use abundance as service, how to stay humble when admired. Every path has its dangers and blessings. Every incarnation is a sacred risk. For advanced souls, the path becomes more intentional. They may choose lives in alignment with missions to guide others to raise consciousness, to embody new paradigms. These beings often carry a deep sense of purpose from a young age, even if they don't know why. They are the artists, healers, disruptors, and quiet lights who seem to carry ancient wisdom in modern skins. But not all souls return to Earth. Some choose to incarnate in other dimensions, worlds beyond our comprehension, with different physical laws and emotional textures. Others become guides working in invisible ways to assist souls still in physical form. Still others dissolve into higher states of unity, becoming less individual and more cosmic, like rays of divine will, expressing themselves without needing a form. There is also the question of soul contracts. Before a new incarnation, many souls meet with others, partners, children, teachers, even enemies, to design the dance of interconnection that will unfold on Earth. These contracts are made not out of obligation, but from a shared desire to help each other grow. This is why we sometimes feel deep connections or repulsions with people we've just met. Something ancient is at work. In this way, life is not a random script imposed by fate, but a co-authored masterpiece shaped by love choice and cosmic intelligence. It is important to note that not all choices are made in full clarity. Some souls carry unresolved energies, fears, or attachments that influence their path. In such cases, spiritual guides may offer gentle correction, helping the soul realign with truth before making its next move. This is not control, it is compassion. The soul's new beginning is never truly separate from its past, but it is not bound by it either. Karma does not mean fate, it means potential. And in every new life, the soul is given the grace to change the story. From the perspective of those still living, this truth can be both humbling and empowering. It reminds us that we too are here by choice, even if we don't remember choosing. Our lives are not accidents. They are canvases sculpted by the soul's longing for growth. Even our struggles are echoes of deeper purposes. So what happens next? Once the soul has made its choice, it begins the descent. It passes again through veils of forgetting. It takes on a new body, a new name, a new timeline. The process is delicate, sacred, and sometimes sorrowful because in order to truly begin again, the soul must forget what it just remembered. But it doesn't lose everything. Whispers of the final vision linger in the heart. Intuition's talents, inexplicable fears, déjà vu, dreams they are fragments of a memory that lives beneath the surface. And when a soul lives in alignment with truth, those fragments begin to glow again. The soul may be born into hardship, but with resilience carved by lifetimes. The soul may be born into love, but with a purpose to expand it. The soul may forget its origin, but somewhere in quiet moments it will feel the echo of its choice. In this way, life is not just survival. It is a mission carried in silence, a sacred script waiting to be remembered. So if you are reading these words now, you are already remembering. You are not here by accident. You chose this, and when this life ends, you will choose again with more wisdom, more compassion, and more courage than you can yet imagine. Because the soul is eternal, and its journey is only beginning. The cycle continues. Rebirth and the hidden meaning of suffering. As the soul descends into a new embodiment, the great wheel of existence turns once more. This is the cycle of rebirth, not merely a repetition of lives, but a spiral upward, an eternal dance between experience and remembrance, between the forgetting of form and the rediscovery of spirit. While each incarnation is unique, it is also part of a greater curriculum, the soul's journey toward wholeness. And at the heart of this curriculum lies one teacher above all others, suffering. From the perspective of the soul, suffering is not a punishment. It is not evidence of abandonment, weakness, or sin. It is a signal, a turning point, a veil that once pierced reveals deeper truth. Most people do not awaken through comfort. They awaken when comfort fails, when the illusions that once gave them security begin to crumble, forcing them to look deeper. Suffering shakes the foundation of our identity. It breaks apart our attachments, our expectations, our delusions of control. It is profoundly uncomfortable, but also profoundly sacred. For it is often only in suffering that we ask real questions. Who am I truly? What do I actually want? What cannot be taken from me? In every rebirth, the soul carries seeds of old lessons not yet mastered. These become the blueprint of the new life's suffering. A soul who once wielded power irresponsibly may return as one learning humility. A soul who betrayed trust may return to experience the cost of broken bonds. A soul who suffered abandonment may choose to become a healer of loneliness. There is symmetry and wisdom here, not as revenge, but as correction. This is the hidden meaning of karma, not as debt, but as opportunity. Each difficulty we face is not imposed from without, but designed from within. Suffering is not meaningless. It is medicine encoded in a pain, often bitter, always potent. The soul knows this before it returns, even if the human forgets. This forgetting is essential. If we knew all our past mistakes and planned trials, we might try to avoid them, but by forgetting, we are forced to face them from the inside with sincerity and courage. And when we do, we grow in ways that are permanent. The soul expands its capacity for love, patience, resilience, and truth. Suffering is also the great equalizer. Regardless of our wealth, appearance, or achievements, no one escapes it. It strips us of superficial differences and reminds us of our shared humanity. In this way, suffering can become the doorway to compassion. When we recognize our pain in others, we are less likely to judge and more likely to serve. The cycle of rebirth ensures that no suffering is wasted. Every wound, every heartbreak, every dark night of the soul becomes a tool in the soul's workshop. What we once resented, we later understand. What once broke us becomes the very thing that heals others through our presence, our story, or our kindness. But not all suffering is karmic in nature. Some is collective, shared across generations, nations, and civilizations. These wounds require collective healing. Sometimes a soul chooses to be born into such circumstances, not for its own karma, but to help uplift a wounded group or lineage. These souls are often empaths, visionaries, or spiritual warriors, carrying burdens not fully their own, yet willingly chosen. There is also the suffering of the awakened ones, the saints, mystics, and light bringers. Their suffering is different. It is not a consequence of ego, but often a side effect of clarity. To see the world's pain with open eyes and an open heart is itself a kind of suffering, but also a form of service. These souls suffer not because they are asleep, but because they are awake in a sleeping world. This brings us to one of the greatest paradoxes in the cycle of rebirth. The deeper the awakening, the greater the suffering, but also the greater the joy. As the soul evolves, it becomes more sensitive, more loving, more courageous. It can no longer numb itself or lie to itself. And so while it feels more deeply, it also loves more deeply, forgives more deeply, and rejoices more profoundly in simple moments. Over time, as the soul matures through lifetimes, its relationship with suffering transforms. It begins to see suffering not as an enemy, but as a sacred ally. Pain becomes less frightening, loss becomes less devastating, even death becomes less final. There is a quiet strength that grows in such a soul, a strength forged in the fire of experience, yet softened by the water of compassion. This is why many advanced souls are not loud. They are not boastful. They carry their wisdom humbly, often quietly, not needing to prove anything. They have suffered enough to no longer seek control or recognition. They know that life is not about escape or achievement, but about present surrender and love. And yet they continue to return, not because they must, but because they choose to serve. These are the souls who break the cycle not to leave the world behind, but to return and lift others out of it. Their suffering becomes their offering. Their scars become their credentials. Their quiet endurance becomes a guiding light for those still lost in the storm. So the cycle continues, but not endlessly. Each rebirth brings the soul closer to its divine essence. Each experience peels back another layer of illusion. Each act of love, each moment of forgiveness, each choice to grow rather than retreat, shifts the soul upward. Eventually, the soul reaches a point where it no longer reincarnates out of need, but out of love. And then perhaps it no longer needs a body at all. It becomes a flame in the darkness, a whisper in a dream, a presence that heals by merely existing. Until then, we are all students of suffering, but we are also artists of redemption, architects of rebirth, and pilgrims on the spiral path of awakening. We are not victims of fate. We are souls in process. The role of grace and divine assistance in the afterlife. Journey. In the grand architecture of the soul's evolution, there exists a force that surpasses all calculation, all effort, and all merit. It is not earned, and yet it descends. It is not demanded, yet it comes. This is grace, the silent hand of the divine that lifts the soul when its strength has failed, that finds the lost even when they do not know they are wandering. Grace is not a theological concept alone. It is a spiritual reality woven into every plane of existence, including the afterlife. When the soul departs from the body, it often enters a realm of reflection, judgment, and correction. But it does not walk that terrain alone. There are helpers, guardians, guides, and divine intelligences whose role is not to punish, but to assist, to gently awaken the soul to its own truth. In many spiritual traditions, these helpers are known by different names: angels, devas, bodhisattvas, light beings, or ancestral spirits. Some are souls who have completed their own journey and now serve as mentors to those still learning. Others are emanations of the divine itself, manifestations of compassion and wisdom, tailored to the soul's specific level of understanding. The presence of grace often appears in subtle ways. A soul tormented by guilt may encounter a vision that softens the heart. A confused spirit may be met by a familiar face who speaks in love. A soul stuck in darkness may feel a sudden light breaking through, not because it earned it, but because something higher willed it so. This divine assistance is most available when the soul begins to desire truth more than self-justification. Even in the afterlife, souls can cling to illusions, fears, or pride. But the moment the soul begins to open even slightly to humility and love, grace rushes in. It has always been waiting, never far, never judging, always near. One of the most powerful forms of divine assistance is remembrance. The soul begins to recall who it truly is, not merely a personality shaped by one lifetime, but an eternal being shaped by countless choices, surrounded always by love. This remembrance is not forced. It is revealed like clouds, parting to show the sun that was always there. In some cases, the soul must pass through purgative realms before it is ready for this remembrance. These are not punishments, but detoxification processes through which the soul sheds dense energies, harmful attachments, or unresolved trauma. Divine helpers stand nearby during this time, not intervening forcefully, but encouraging, offering insights, whispering wisdom. This is the cooperative dance of justice and mercy, of karma and grace. Karma ensures that every action has consequence, that the soul learns through experience. Grace ensures that the soul is never alone, never unloved, and never beyond redemption. Where karma holds the soul accountable, grace holds the soul gently. In some rare cases, souls who have committed great harm may remain in a kind of self-created shadow, refusing the light, resisting love. But even here, grace does not abandon them. It waits eternally patient. The divine is not in a hurry. To the human mind, this may seem inefficient or too merciful. But to the eternal, every soul is worth reclaiming, no matter how lost. One of the great revelations in the afterlife is this: love is the law. Not as a rule imposed from above, but as the structure of reality itself. Everything in the afterlife is shaped by the quality of the soul's inner state. If one is filled with love, one naturally ascends to realms of light. If one is bitter, one dwells in bitter places, not as a punishment, but as resonance. But even here, grace can intervene. A single moment of surrender, a single cry of the heart, a single act of forgiveness can shift the entire energetic field. Divine assistance is triggered not by perfection, but by sincerity. The soul that sincerely seeks healing will always find a response. In the mystical traditions, this is likened to the story of the prodigal son, the soul that wanders far into the illusions of ego and returns not in shame, but in awakening. The father does not scold. He runs to embrace. This is the nature of divine grace, not calculating, but overflowing. Human prayers also play a role here. The prayers of the living for the dead can become bridges of light across dimensions. When we pray for those who have passed, we send them not only love, but orientation. Souls confused or trapped in sorrow can feel these prayers as warmth, as direction, as encouragement to move toward the light. This is why so many cultures honor their dead with ritual offering and remembrance. These acts are not merely cultural, they are energetic transmissions. The living and the dead remain connected, and the love that flows between them can be a vessel of grace. Sometimes, a soul in the afterlife becomes a vessel of grace for others. Having undergone its own purification, it begins to serve. It whispers to the living through intuition. It watches over loved ones. It becomes a guide to newly departed souls. The cycle of assistance continues flowing in both directions, from the divine to the soul, and from the soul to others. This interconnected web of assistance is the hidden architecture of the afterlife. It ensures that no soul is left behind, no pain is eternal, no mistake is final. It is built not on judgment, but on understanding, not on wrath, but on wisdom, not on shame, but on love. In the end, the soul realizes that it was never truly alone. Every step, even the painful ones, was witnessed. Every cry was heard. Every longing for truth was met. The divine is not separate from the soul's journey. It is woven through it like breath through the body. Grace is not the suspension of justice, but the fulfillment of it in a higher octave. Where justice demands balance, grace offers transformation. Where karma teaches lessons, grace provides support. Together they sculpt the soul into something radiant, resilient, and real. And so in the journey after death, it is not only what we have done that shapes our path, but how open we are to receive. For in the stillness beyond the veil, beyond fear and memory and name, grace waits, patient, tender, ready. Not what you think. The phrase final judgment has for centuries evoked awe, dread, and mystery. Images from ancient texts, paintings, and sermons often depict it as a divine courtroom scene. Souls lined up, angels with trumpets, a god on a throne casting eternal verdicts of heaven or hell. But such imagery, while emotionally powerful, is far more symbolic than literal. When stripped of fear and re-examined through a spiritual lens, the final judgment is not what most people think. It is not external damnation, it is internal revelation. The true nature of the final judgment lies not in punishment, but in truth. It is the moment when all illusions are burned away by light. When the soul sees itself fully, its intentions, its fears, its courage, its failures, and most importantly, its essence. This is not judgment by an angry deity, but a mirror held by divine love, and in that mirror nothing can be hidden. The process is deeply intimate and individualized. Each soul undergoes its own review not as a checklist of sins and merits, but as a vivid reliving of every moment, especially those where love was given or denied. It is said that the soul re-experiences not only what it did, but how those actions impacted others. In this sense, the final judgment is not about God punishing, it is about the soul awakening. One might imagine it as a panoramic life review where time collapses and the soul witnesses the ripple effect of its choices. A harsh word spoken in anger is felt in the heart of the person who received it. A moment of compassion extended to a stranger is relived in its full impact. The soul sees the interconnection of all life, and through this vision, understanding dawns. This process is not designed to shame. It is designed to liberate. When we carry guilt, we imagine judgment to be cruel. But in truth, divine judgment is cleansing, not condemning. It is a fire that burns away pretense, ego, and denial. What remains is the naked truth of who we are and who we were always meant to become. The pain of this moment for some souls is real, but it is not inflicted. It is the natural consequence of seeing clearly. When a soul finally grasps how it harmed others or betrayed its own integrity, it may feel sorrow, not because it is being punished, but because it finally understands what love truly is. And yet this sorrow is not the end. In fact, it is the beginning of healing. For once the soul acknowledges its truth, it becomes teachable. It becomes capable of growth. This is the secret mercy of the final judgment. It is not final in the way we often imagine. It is not a one-time verdict, but a doorway to deeper refinement, deeper self-awareness, and deeper return to divine harmony. In some traditions, this process is described as occurring in stages, each level of review revealing deeper layers of the self. At first, the soul may judge itself harshly based on human standards, but as the soul ascends in consciousness, it begins to understand why it made certain choices, what fears or wounds drove its behavior, and how every experience was an opportunity for awakening. This does not mean all actions are excused. Far from it. But it means every action is seen in context, not to justify, but to transform. The divine does not seek to destroy the sinner, but to rescue the truth within them. As such, the final judgment is not the end of the soul's journey. It is a profound turning point. There is also another dimension to this process. The soul must face not only its actions, but also its unlived potential. The gifts it buried, the love it withheld, the forgiveness it denied, the joy it avoided out of fear, these missed opportunities become visible. This can be painful, but it is also a sacred invitation to try again, to choose differently in the soul's next phase. Many mystics describe this moment as both exquisite and excruciating. It is a cosmic truth serum. All masks fall, all self-deceptions dissolve. What remains is the essence, the eternal core that has walked through lifetimes to find its way home. And when that essence chooses love truly, deeply, fully, it is received not with wrath, but with joy. The final judgment, then, is not a one-size-fits-all tribunal. It is tailored to each soul's path, each soul's choices, and each soul's readiness. Some may ascend quickly through this phase. Others may linger wrestling with denial, guilt, or resistance. But always the path forward remains open. The divine does not close the door. The door is within, and it opens the moment the soul surrenders to truth. There is also the collective aspect of judgment. As humanity evolves, we too are being judged, not by an outside force, but by the consequences of our choices. How we treat the earth, how we treat each other, how we shape our societies, these are all forms of collective karma. And our awakening as a species will depend on our willingness to face those truths as a whole. The good news is that judgment is not the same as condemnation. To be judged is to be seen clearly. To be condemned is to be abandoned. The divine does the former, never the latter. We are seen and we are loved. This paradox is the heart of divine justice. It wounds and heals in the same stroke. It breaks the ego and restores the soul. Ultimately, the final judgment is a mirror of God's nature. Not a tyrant, but a teacher. Not an executioner, but a midwife for the birth of the true self. In this light, we come to understand the ancient saying, "Judge not lest ye be judged," not because judgment is inherently evil, but because when the full truth is revealed, we may find we were not ready to see what others bore in silence. And so the final judgment stands not as a cliff from which we fall, but as a threshold we cross. It is the doorway through which the soul reclaims its divine identity. It is the sacred moment where the soul meets itself, and in that meeting remembers God. Why some souls reincarnate quickly while others wait. The question of reincarnation is not merely a curiosity of metaphysics or mysticism. It is a profound spiritual inquiry into how souls evolve, heal, and grow through the cycles of embodiment. Across many traditions, from Eastern philosophies to esoteric Christian teachings, reincarnation is seen not as a punishment, but as a mercy. Yet within this broader understanding lies a more intricate mystery. Why do some souls return to Earth swiftly, while others linger for centuries or more in the spiritual realms before incarnating again? To grasp this, one must first understand that reincarnation is not random. It is not dictated by cosmic roulette, but by a soul's vibration, readiness, and unfinished work. The soul exists in a continuum of consciousness, where choices made in one life reverberate across lifetimes. Some souls, having left the body abruptly through trauma, violence, or suicide, remain in a state of energetic turbulence. They are drawn back to Earth quickly, not always because they desire to return, but because unfinished lessons pull them back like gravity. Imagine a student leaving school mid-term without completing the curriculum. That soul is more likely to reincarnate quickly in order to re-enter the classroom, often in conditions that mirror or contrast the past life to trigger remembrance and resolution. This is not punishment, it is divine curriculum. On the other hand, souls that completed a cycle with greater awareness and balance often enter a state of extended rest, reflection, and integration in the spiritual world. These souls may choose to wait not out of avoidance, but out of wisdom. They may need to process the density of Earth experience to recover from intense karmic entanglements or to prepare for a life of higher purpose. That requires a very specific alignment of time, place, and relationships. Think of it like planting seeds. Some seeds sprout in days, others lie dormant for years, waiting for just the right season. The soul is the same. Some are drawn back by urgency, others wait for divine timing. There is also the matter of soul contracts. Before reincarnating, souls often enter into agreements with guides, with soul groups, and even with other souls who will become family friends or catalysts. If a soul's next life involves intersecting with certain other beings, it may wait until those souls are also ready to incarnate. In this way, reincarnation becomes less about individual will and more about collective orchestration. Furthermore, not all waiting is passive. Souls in the spiritual realms often engage in active preparation. They may serve as guides to others, assist in healing collective trauma, or study advanced spiritual knowledge. In such cases, the soul chooses to remain disembodied for long periods to grow in ways that only non-physical existence allows. Conversely, there are souls whose evolution has reached a certain plateau. They reincarnate quickly because they are still deeply entangled in earthly desires, attachments, or fears. Their return is more compulsive than conscious, driven by unresolved karma, addiction to sensation, or emotional debt. These are often the lives where suffering repeats in cycles until awareness breaks through. This is why not all souls evolve at the same pace. Reincarnation is tailored to each soul's path. A young soul might need many short, simple lives to develop moral awareness. An older soul may take on lives of deep hardship to burn through karma in a condensed time. Some souls choose difficult reincarnations out of love to help family lines heal ancestral wounds, to serve in times of crisis, or to teach others through their example. There's also a higher law at play, the law of resonance. A soul's next life must match its energetic frequency. Just as a radio can only pick up stations on its wavelength, so too a soul can only incarnate into circumstances that reflect its current state. If the soul has cultivated wisdom, compassion, and clarity, it may attract a life of spiritual leadership, artistic expression, or healing. If the soul is burdened by resentment, envy, or ego, it may reincarnate into situations that amplify those tendencies, so it can confront them face to face. But here lies a gentle truth: no soul is ever forced. Even in the case of urgent return, the soul's consent, however subtle or veiled, is always involved. The universe honors free will even if that will is clouded by ignorance. What seems like compulsion is often the soul's deeper knowing that it must return, not to suffer, but to remember. Sometimes a soul may resist reincarnation. It may linger in the spiritual world, reluctant to re-enter the density and pain of earth. These souls are often old, wise, and tired. They remember how hard it is to live in a body. Yet even they are gently guided, not coerced toward the next incarnation once the timing is right and the heart is ready. One fascinating layer is the involvement of soul families and lineages. Many souls reincarnate within the same bloodlines, ethnic groups, or spiritual communities. This is not coincidence. It is a reflection of soul-level loyalty and karmic healing. A soul may wait to be born as the grandchild of its former spouse or the cousin of a soul it once betrayed, so that old wounds may be healed through new relationships. There are also what some traditions call mission souls, beings who incarnate not because they need to, but because they choose to. These are the teachers, healers, revolutionaries, and visionaries who return out of service. They may come in times of global transition or crisis, bringing wisdom or awakening. These souls often have long periods of preparation before returning, as their incarnation involves heavy responsibilities. In contrast, karmic souls may reincarnate rapidly and repeatedly, caught in loops of reaction rather than creation. Their lives may feel short, chaotic, or repetitive, not as punishment, but as opportunity. Each time they come back, they are given a new chance to make a different choice, to step out of the cycle and into awareness. Ultimately, the speed of reincarnation reflects a soul's unique trajectory. There is no better or worse in how fast or slow a soul returns. What matters is whether the reincarnation supports growth, integration, and love. Even a fast return can be sacred. Even a long wait can be divine. And so when we look at the soul's journey with expanded vision, we begin to see reincarnation not as a trap, but as a symphony of learning. Each return is a note in the melody of becoming. Each pause is a rest before the next crescendo. Whether we come back quickly or wait for centuries, the soul is always moving gently, powerfully toward its highest self. Why do some souls get stuck between lives? The transition between lives is often described in spiritual teachings as a sacred passage, a time of reflection, healing, and preparation for the soul's next journey on earth. But not all souls move gracefully through this in-between state. Some become stuck, lingering in the spiritual borderlands, unable to fully ascend or return. This stuckness, often called earthbound, is not a punishment, but the result of energetic, emotional, or karmic imbalances that anchor the soul to the realm it has just departed. To understand why souls get stuck between lives, we must first revisit the nature of the death transition. When the body dies, the soul does not vanish. Instead, it detaches from the physical form and begins to journey inward toward the spiritual realms, toward its essence. In ideal conditions, this journey is guided by beings of light, soul companions, or ancestral spirits. But in cases where death is sudden, traumatic, or filled with unresolved fear, the soul may become disoriented. It doesn't realize it has died or cannot accept it. This state of confusion is particularly common in violent deaths, such as accidents, murder-suicide, or warfare. The soul may still be entangled in the emotional shock of the event, replaying it in loops. This replaying creates a psychic echo that traps the soul near the location of its passing or around the people it left behind. It's not that the soul is evil or punished. It is simply stuck in a loop of unprocessed emotion. Unresolved attachments are another cause. Some souls cling to loved ones, property, identities, or desires from their former life. These attachments create energetic cords that tether the soul to the material world. For example, a mother who died suddenly might stay close to a grieving child, unwilling to move on for fear of abandonment. A man obsessed with power or wealth might hover near his estate, unwilling to release control. These situations can delay the soul's ascent into higher dimensions. Another contributing factor is fear of judgment. Some souls, based on religious conditioning or guilt over past deeds, resist moving toward the light because they fear punishment or hell. They hide in the shadows of the in-between, unsure whether they are worthy of peace. Ironically, this self-imposed exile often creates more suffering than the divine judgment they fear, which in most traditions is not punitive, but compassionate. There are also souls who remain stuck because of unfinished business. Perhaps they died before they could apologize, forgive, or fulfill a vow. They carry this burden into the afterlife and feel they must resolve it before moving on. While noble in intention, this sense of duty can keep the soul earthbound if it forgets that true resolution often comes through surrender, not control. In rare cases, souls may become trapped by energetic interference such as curses, trauma fields, or even human rituals that disrupt the natural passage of the soul. Certain war zones, concentration camps, or mass death sites become dense with such energies. These places can act like spiritual bottlenecks where many confused souls gather, amplifying one another's pain. These fields often require spiritual clearing or intervention from awakened humans or higher beings to release the trapped energies. In esoteric traditions such as Theosophy, Anthroposophy, or Tibetan Buddhism, it is taught that the clarity of one's consciousness at the time of death significantly impacts the soul's ability to pass through the after-death state smoothly. If the mind is clouded by addiction, rage, or fear, the soul lacks the inner light needed to navigate. It's like entering a vast wilderness without a map or compass. The more spiritually prepared a person is in life, the more fluid and graceful the transition tends to be. So what happens to these stuck souls? They linger in what some call the lower astral plane, a realm close to Earth shaped by thought, memory, and emotion. In this realm, time is not linear. A soul may believe it has only been a few days while centuries pass on Earth. Some may become what folklore calls ghosts, not malevolent beings, but confused souls caught between dimensions. Others drift aimlessly, feeding off emotional vibrations, sometimes attaching themselves to living humans in search of familiarity or energy. But here is the comforting truth: no soul is abandoned forever. In time, all souls are reached by guides, ancestors, angels, or even the prayers and love of the living. Spiritual helpers work tirelessly in the in-between realms to awaken these souls, remind them of who they are, and gently guide them toward healing and release. Rituals, ceremonies, and prayers from the living can help. When we hold space for the departed, lighting candles, offering blessings, or simply speaking their name with love, we send vibrations that pierce the veil. These frequencies act like lifelines, calling the soul home. Many spiritual traditions include rites to help the dead transition. From the Tibetan Book of the Dead to Catholic masses for the deceased, these are not empty rituals. They are spiritual technologies designed to open portals of light. In modern times, spiritual practitioners known as soul rescuers or psychopomps work with stuck souls. Through meditation, dream work, or shamanic journeys, they enter the in-between realms to find and guide these souls. These healers do not force movement, but offer remembrance, restoring the soul's free will by reminding it of its divine origin. Importantly, not all souls stuck between lives are in torment. Some linger peacefully, observing loved ones or awaiting the right conditions to reincarnate. Their delay is not due to trauma, but to divine timing. What appears as stuckness from the human perspective may from the soul's view be a necessary pause. Nevertheless, for those who are genuinely lost, the key to release is often found in forgiveness, surrender, and light. When a soul forgives itself or others, when it lets go of clinging or fear, a subtle shift occurs. The frequency rises. The path opens. What was once invisible becomes clear. A guide appears, a portal forms, and the soul, long wandering in fog, steps into a light it had forgotten was always waiting. Ultimately, getting stuck between lives is not a failure, it's a part of the soul's learning. Even this liminal space with all its shadows and echoes serves a purpose. It teaches the soul about attachment, truth, compassion, and the profound freedom that comes with release. And when the soul is ready, truly ready, nothing in heaven or earth can stop its return to the journey home. Why certain souls choose not to reincarnate again. The cycle of reincarnation is often portrayed as endless, a wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. For many souls, this journey is a classroom of spiritual evolution, where each lifetime presents new lessons, challenges, and opportunities to grow closer to truth, compassion, and divine remembrance. Yet there are souls who reach a pivotal point on this wheel, who after countless incarnations make the conscious decision not to return to the physical plane. This choice is not born from rejection or escape, but from completion. It is the result of having learned what needed to be learned, healed what needed to be healed, and integrated what needed to be integrated. To understand why some souls stop reincarnating, we must explore the purpose of incarnation itself. Souls come into the physical world to experience polarity, light and dark, joy and pain, life and death. These contrasts sharpen awareness and cultivate wisdom. In the dense realms of earth, the soul forgets its divine origin, and this amnesia creates the conditions for free will, karma, and personal discovery. Through relationship, suffering, choices, and transformation, the soul expands. It learns to love, to forgive, to let go. These are not abstract lessons. They are embodied and felt deeply in the human condition. But there comes a point in the soul's journey where the need for incarnation diminishes. This often occurs after the soul has fulfilled its major karmic contract, those deep energetic agreements made with others for mutual growth. The soul may have incarnated in every major role: the victim and the perpetrator, the parent and the child, the betrayer and the betrayed. Through these lives, it has come to see not just the individual events, but the patterns behind them, the archetypes at play, and the cosmic dance of evolution unfolding. It no longer identifies solely with the body or ego. It begins to remember itself as consciousness beyond form. One reason a soul may choose not to reincarnate is because it has completed its karmic cycle. Karma is not punishment, it is simply the energetic law of cause and effect. When a soul acts with love, the energy it creates returns in kind. When it acts out of fear or harm, it creates opportunities to learn compassion and accountability. Once the soul has harmonized these energies, no longer carrying unresolved debts, grudges or desires, it may no longer be magnetically pulled back into earthly existence. Another reason is the soul's shift towards service in higher realms. Some souls evolve beyond personal growth and begin to focus on guiding others. These are the souls who become spirit guides, ascended masters, or teachers in non-physical dimensions. Their compassion and wisdom continue to serve humanity, but they do so without needing a physical body. They work through synchronicities, inspiration, intuition, and healing energies. This transition from student to teacher, from embodied to ethereal, marks a sacred graduation. There are also souls who choose not to reincarnate because they have outgrown the limitations of physicality. Earth is a beautiful but challenging realm. The density of matter, the veil of forgetting, the pain of separation, all of it can be intense. A soul that has achieved mastery may no longer need these constraints to evolve. Instead, it may seek more subtle forms of existence, incarnating in higher dimensional planes, exploring spiritual worlds where thought and energy shape reality more fluidly or merging more deeply into the divine source. Importantly, choosing not to reincarnate is not a decision made from ego or avoidance. It is not the soul saying, "I've had enough," in frustration. Rather, it is a serene recognition that its mission in the material realm is complete. It is the same way a wise teacher retires after decades of service, not because they're tired, but because the work has been fulfilled. Interestingly, some souls do return not out of need, but out of compassionate choice. These are known in various traditions as bodhisattvas, wanderers, or volunteers. In Buddhist thought, a bodhisattva is a soul who, despite being ready for liberation, chooses to reincarnate to help others awaken. In mystical Christianity, saints and prophets often return again and again to uplift collective consciousness. In modern metaphysical traditions, starseeds or light workers are souls from advanced realms who incarnate on Earth during times of great change, not to resolve karma, but to assist in planetary evolution. Therefore, the absence of reincarnation does not mean the end of existence. On the contrary, it marks the beginning of a new phase of divine participation. The soul's learning continues, but in different forms. It may explore cosmic creativity, help design new worlds, support collective ascension, or even choose to merge back into the source, dissolving the illusion of separation entirely. But what about souls who seem to resist reincarnation out of trauma fear or fatigue? These are not souls who have graduated. They are souls who are pausing, Some have experienced intense suffering, lifetimes of war, betrayal, poverty, or spiritual exile and need time in the afterlife to heal. Others have been disillusioned with the harshness of the earth plane and hesitate to return. These souls are often gently guided by loving beings in the spiritual realms, encouraged to see Earth not as a prison, but as a canvas for expression and transformation. When the soul is ready, when clarity, desire, and strength return, it may choose again. Ultimately, the choice not to reincarnate is one of freedom, not finality. It is a conscious step into a broader identity, one not confined to time, body, or individual storylines. It is the soul's realization that it is not the character in the play, but the actor, the director, and even the light that makes the stage visible. This understanding brings with it a profound peace. There is nothing more to prove, nothing more to fix. Only presence, only being. This decision is rarely made in isolation. The soul consults with spiritual elders, soul family, and its own higher self. Together, they review its journey, its triumphs, wounds, and transformations. They ask, "What did you come here to learn? Did you learn it? Did you love well? Did you forgive deeply? Did you awaken?" If the answers echo with truth, the path forward unfolds. And if that path leads away from reincarnation, it does so with grace. As living beings still on the journey, we can honor these souls by trusting that each soul knows its right timing, its own sacred rhythm. Some stay close to earth to guide, some move to higher realms to create, and some rest in the arms of the eternal. The soul's story never ends, it simply changes form, deepening its dance with the divine. Can the soul choose its next life? The question of whether the soul chooses its next life stirs both curiosity and reverence. Are our births random, or do they emerge from a deeper intelligence within us? According to spiritual traditions, both ancient and modern, the answer is profound. Yes, the soul plays a central role in selecting its next incarnation. But this choice is not impulsive or based on shallow desires. It is a highly intentional, spiritually guided process that takes place in realms far beyond our current comprehension. It is a dialogue between the soul, divine intelligence, and often a council of spiritual beings devoted to helping each soul evolve in harmony with its true essence. Before delving into how this choice is made, it's vital to understand that the soul operates from a vastly different perspective than the ego. While the human mind may crave comfort, status, or ease, the soul prioritizes growth, experience, and the healing of karmic imprints. From the soul's vantage point, suffering is not to be avoided. It is often a gateway to deeper love, compassion, or awakening. Thus, the lives we live, though sometimes filled with hardship or mystery, are often chosen for their potential to catalyze spiritual evolution. In the period between lives, what some traditions call the interlife or the bardo, the soul enters a phase of reflection and planning. This is not a solitary process. Many souls are met by a council of wise, loving beings, guides, elders, or ascended souls who help them review their previous incarnation. This review is not judgmental, but illuminating. The soul sees not only what it did, but why and how its actions rippled outward into the lives of others. It relives moments from multiple perspectives, feeling the pain it caused and the love it offered, understanding the deeper lessons that unfolded through its choices. From this place of expanded awareness, the soul assesses what remains unresolved. Did it struggle to forgive? Did it suppress its voice? Did it abandon its inner truth to please others? Or perhaps it learned to love more deeply or served in quiet humility? Whatever the case, the soul begins to clarify its intention for the next life, to continue. A lesson, complete a karmic cycle, serve others, or explore a new aspect of being. This leads to the soul's participation in the selection of the next incarnation. Contrary to a mechanistic view of reincarnation, the soul does not get randomly inserted into bodies like a number in a lottery. Instead, it collaborates with higher intelligences to choose its body, family, culture, time period, and even the major themes and challenges it will face. These choices are not about reward or punishment, but about alignment. What setting will best support the soul's intention? For instance, a soul that struggled with pride may choose a life where it must develop humility, perhaps by being born into modest circumstances. A soul that wounded others in a past life may now choose to experience what it once inflicted, not as punishment, but as a pathway to understanding forgiveness and balance. A soul that has mastered certain lessons may choose a life of service, returning as a teacher, healer, or guide for others. Every detail from physical appearance to family dynamics can hold purpose. This process is echoed in the writings of many mystics and near-death experiencers. Some describe soul contract, where the soul and others agree to meet in life to help each other grow. A parent who will abandon the child, a partner who will trigger betrayal, a teacher who will awaken one's potential, all may be participants in a complex and sacred web of pre-life agreements woven for the purpose of healing and evolution. From this higher view, even painful encounters are infused with meaning. However, it's important to understand that free will remains intact. While the soul may choose the blueprint for its life, it does not script every scene. The plan is flexible, and human choices matter. The life we live is a dynamic dance between fate and freedom, destiny and decision. We may be born into a certain family or body, but how we respond, whether we choose love or fear, forgiveness or resentment, continually shapes the unfolding of our path. Moreover, not all souls choose their next life immediately. Some spend extended time in the spirit realm, resting, learning, healing, or assisting others. Souls that have experienced traumatic lives may need time to release lingering pain before reincarnating. Others may act as spirit guides or take part in helping design the lives of others. In this way, the afterlife is not just a waiting room, but a dimension of active participation in the spiritual ecosystem. Interestingly, advanced souls sometimes choose difficult lives, intentionally lives filled with limitation, illness, or isolation, not because they need to suffer, but because such lives can catalyze deep wisdom and compassion. These souls understand that the depth of one's experience is not measured by comfort, but by transformation. In choosing a life of hardship, they often serve as beacons for others, embodying endurance, grace, and unconditional love amidst adversity. Modern spiritual psychology, especially in the work of Dr. Michael Newton and Dolores Cannon, presents consistent testimony from hypnotic regressions, where clients recall pre-birth planning sessions, where they chose their gender, family, personality traits, and even the exit points of death. These recollections support the idea that the soul is not passively carried through existence, but is an architect of its destiny, one who participates in the design of each incarnation with extraordinary care. That said, not all souls make these choices with equal clarity. Younger or less experienced souls may require more guidance. They may be more reactive, more attached to unresolved patterns, and therefore may enter lives that repeat familiar dynamics. In such cases, spirit guides often take a more active role in steering the soul toward a life that will break old cycles. As the soul matures, as its choices become more conscious and refined, reflecting its deepening wisdom. In conclusion, the soul indeed has agency in choosing its next life, but it does so from a place beyond our human preferences. It chooses not for comfort, but for evolution, not for pleasure, but for transformation. The soul sees lifetimes not as goals to be conquered, but as sacred opportunities to remember to heal and to return again and again until the separation from Source dissolves and only truth remains. This understanding invites us to see our own life through new eyes. Perhaps we are not victims of fate, but participants in a mystery so vast and loving that we ourselves chose to be here now, this very body, at this very time, not by accident, but with profound purpose, a journey that transcends time and death. As we reach the end of this deep and expansive exploration into the mysteries of death, the afterlife, and the soul's journey beyond the veil, one truth emerges with clarity. Death is not the end. It is a sacred threshold. It is the closing of one chapter and the opening of another, in a book written not in ink, but in light intention and eternal memory. The more we look at death, not as a fearful unknown, but as a continuation of consciousness, the more we begin to live with reverence, presence, and purpose. From the moment the soul separates from the body, a grand orchestration unfolds, one filled with beauty, guidance, remembrance, and sometimes deep reckoning. The soul encounters realms shaped not by superstition but by energy vibration, karma, love, and choice. It may pass through stages of release, healing review, purification, and preparation. It may reunite with loved ones, spirit guides, soul groups, and higher beings who have watched over its journey for lifetimes. The soul is never truly alone. Throughout this journey, the soul is offered a mirror, not one that judges, but one that reflects with clarity. Every act of love, every unspoken truth, every pain ignored or embraced, all become visible in the light of eternal understanding. It is in these moments that the soul chooses not to condemn itself, but to learn to release guilt and to recommit to the path of growth. Even the most wounded soul is never lost. Redemption is always possible because the universe is not ruled by punishment, but by healing. The path after death is not a one-size-fits-all road. Some souls move swiftly, others rest. Some seek reincarnation quickly, while others remain in higher dimensions of teaching and service. Some are met with joyful reunions, others face the pain of their past with grace. And yet all are embraced by the same universal intelligence that designed life in the first place, an intelligence rooted in divine order, compassion, and infinite possibility. In many sacred traditions, from Tibetan Buddhism to early Christian mysticism, from indigenous teachings to metaphysical sciences, death is seen as a return to our true nature, our eternal family, and the original vibration of Source. It is where the illusions of the material world are peeled away, and what remains is the essence of who we truly are. In this space, the soul remembers its timeless identity, and with that remembrance, it heals. Importantly, this exploration has also illuminated that we, the living, play a role in the journey of the dead. Our thoughts, our prayers, our remembrance, and our love do not vanish into the void. They become bridges, energetic threads that support the soul in transition. When we honor the dead, we help them move forward. When we forgive them, we release chains they may still carry. When we light a candle or speak their name with love, we become part of their path toward light. But perhaps the greatest revelation is this: the study of death is ultimately the study of life. To understand what awaits beyond is to deepen how we live here and now. If the soul is eternal, if every action echoes through dimensions, if love is the true currency of the cosmos, then every moment becomes sacred. Every relationship becomes an opportunity to grow. Every challenge becomes a test not of survival, but of soul expansion. We begin to ask different questions. Not how do I avoid suffering, but what is this pain trying to teach me? Not what do I gain from this, but what does my soul become through this experience? We begin to walk not just as humans in time, but as eternal souls in motion, remembering pieces of ourselves in every encounter. And when our time comes, when the body grows still and the breath fades, we can meet that moment not with fear, but with awe. Because we will know that what lies ahead is not a black void, but a luminous passage filled with familiarity and peace. We will be received, guided, and embraced. We will be asked, not, were you perfect, but did you grow? Did you love? Did you remember who you are? In that light, let us live differently now. Let us forgive more easily, speak more truthfully, love more boldly, and release what no longer serves. Let us walk gently, knowing that the veil is thin, and that every choice today echoes into eternity. Let us honor the dead, not just with mourning, but with transformation. Let their journey inspire our own awakening. For in the end, the soul does not belong to death, it belongs to eternity. And so do you.